Welcome, everybody. So, welcome to the Theater 1. We're going to start with our next session, as Ivar has suggested when we were in the hall. Today, we're going to talk about Sapiens and the Anthropocene. I'm going to give you a small introduction into the history of Homo sapiens and also the Anthropocene and how the Anthropocene and Sapiens can connect each other. My name is Sjoerd Kluiving. I'm a sociology professor at the Faculty of Humanities and also at IVM located, and I'm studying geoarchaeology and the Anthropocene. And I'm keen also to work on Sapiens, as you will see in my presentation. Usually when you start a talk, you start with a joke, right? Most people like a joke when you get started, but I thought about talk about the Anthropocene. Sometimes a joke is not, it's not so suitable, so I looked for comics on the Anthropocene, and I found Studio by Christian Lindemann. He's associated in Berlin, also to the Kulturhaus, and I think he took a nice take, in fact, on the biodiversity crisis, which we have at the moment. And this is one way how you can portray or how you can communicate, of course, in a lighter way, maybe the things which are happening to us. Okay, let's first go into Homo sapiens. Who is Homo sapiens? Who is he? Defined is that species as a wise man in Latin, and he's also one of several species in the genus Homo, and the only one which is not extinct. When we look at another definition, and this, by the way, is also 100 million years ago, we can see over here, this is the way how we actually developed. Oops, for this one, yeah. So, where does Homo sapiens originate from? It's a species of all the highly developed primates on Earth. That's interesting, and when you stand for the highly developed primates, these are also all these animals which we are now below us, in fact. We actually are a species which is derived from all the way from Eukarya and Animalia up to what we are now. So we are the Homo species derived from all these sorts. And as you can see also, we have some cousins and neighbors. You may have heard about the Neanderthals. Who has heard about Neanderthals? Most of you have. Who has heard about the Denisovans? Few, relatively few. So we do have some neighbors. They have been interbreeding also. Even in the last 100,000 years, there's evidence that Neanderthals and Denisovans also interbred with Homo sapiens. So how pure is Homo sapiens? Or can you ask these questions about Homo sapiens? When it's about the research about where we come from, there's two hypotheses. There's the once out of Africa hypothesis and the double out of Africa. And it also shows some relativity also where we as humans come from, but all based on East Africa. Okay, so what's then the problem with Homo sapiens? Are we the enlightening? Are we a sort, in fact, which is an inventor, which is also, as we see here, on top of the chain? Are we the boss? I guess we are, right? This is the Anthropocene. Well, this is also a way of, how to portray this in biocentrism. It's like an anti-anthropocenic belief in where we are a philosophy of all living beings. And one of the maybe positive things is that we're the first species ever that is also conscious of the changes we are bringing about and can also be conscious about the changes we are bringing on in the future. So we really have to ask us the questions, is Homo sapiens anthropocentric? One of the geologists I'm following is Elizabeth Colbert. She's the author of the sixth mass extinction. This extinction, we're getting it. And she wrote a recent book, Under a White Sky. And she defined human impact in terms of transformation of the landscape, of dammed or diverted most of the world's major rivers, fertilized plants, and fix more nitrogen, in fact, than all natural ecosystems together. And that our transport system in planes, cars, and power stations, our energy system emits more CO2, in fact, than volcanoes do. And we, as people are living in the Netherlands, especially the northern Netherlands, we also cause earthquakes. That's all in our human power to do so with the help of nature. Today, in terms of biomass, we can say that people outweigh with wild animals by more than 8 to 1 them. This week there was a WWF report actually stating again, which is a number which is known, that in the past 50 years, 70% of wild animals got extinct. So that's a huge figure, which was restated every year, but it's here to repeat. So, Homo sapiens has become the major driver of extinction, but also of speciation. So with these messages, Elizabeth welcomes us to the Anthropocene. The problem that we have is interesting also, is the Canadian Club of Rome. Who of you has heard of the Club of Rome 50 years ago? Okay, that's reasonable. They have a celebration this year. They exist for 50 years. It's their 50 years anniversary of the Club of Rome, which means that 50 years ago already scientists were proposing, in fact, that there was an end to our sources, that we were on a road of, endless, not an endless road anymore. It happened, of course, it also ended by an energy crisis, as you may recall. The problem is far worse than expected, same word as Philip was saying in the intro, and climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. So, to define what the Anthropocene is also gives me a sort of uneasy feeling, because at the one time you say, you can be fascinated by the vast interdisciplinarity and by the enormous amount of disciplines which come together, but it also, of course, offers a gloomy prospect of a planet in despair. So it concerns many disciplines and planetary systems, and also, if you can see from the literature, many authors, also journalists, scientists, other academics are in fact picking this as book choices. These are the books from my bookshelf, just a selection of them, because most of us e-books, by the way. And this is some books I just found, they're also about the Anthropocene. Anybody can write about the Anthropocene. And there are quite many books also about it. And I could also pick another 10 one or another 21 from another source. There is an enormous amount about the Anthropocene at the moment there. So, what is the Anthropocene? It's us, it's our society as we are here. It's also politics, although they do not use the word Anthropocene in politics. It's everything they discuss is about this system, is about our human-dominated world we are in. And it's very much also a legal thing. Nowadays, we only can stop nitrogen exchange by legal courts, or can stop climate change by legal courts. So it's very much a legal thing. And of course, it's the economy. And that's what Christian will also talk to us later today. But it's one of the driving forces also of the Anthropocene. So in the discussion on the Anthropocene, there's also a discussion on when does it start. There is the 11,000, there's the domestication of agricultural revolution in deep history, there's the European expansion, industrial revolution, there's the great acceleration, and then there's where we are now, with the question mark. And I must say that in the geology, in the neuroscience world, basically the great acceleration is now tested, is now proposed as a formal starting date of the Anthropocene. There is a working group in the Stratigraphic Commission of the global geological community, and they've received several proposals. And one of them is here in the San Francisco Basin in California, which shows that after 1950, the radioactive elements from nuclear testing after the 50s actually is very well visible in the cores, which gives also a support, one of the candidates for a stratotype. Okay, so knowing all this, what do we need, in fact, for a sustainable future? We need, of course, there's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They are nicely formed. There are so many that you probably cannot name them at once. Ivar, can you name them at once? No, you can't. He's the leader of sustainability at the VU, so that difficult is it to get. I'm not just joking, but it means that we have to find different ways. So they found out also ways of grouping them. In 10 principles, there's also human rights, labor, environment, anti-corruption. You can label or group them roughly about them. There's also the pyramid, so to order them with people, ecological, spiritual. You can staple them on top of each other. And of course, there's the staircase of the VU. When you enter the VU in the main building, On both ways, you can see the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And we also have now our publications, Philip, also marked with Sustainable Development Goals. So it's getting there. We're getting taught also by these goals. Another way of approaching it is by a book by Jan Rotmans. He's from Drift, Erasmus University. He looked at these different transitions. And we need 10 systematic transitions. These are the energy transition, which basically has 3 transitions of fossil to green, but also about centralized to decentral, and also from different materials. So the raw materials transition is part of it. The circular transition is part of it. Basically, these first 3 transitions are grouped in advice by the SER, the SER in the Netherlands, and the Dutch government as to be handled together. They have policy documents now which you cannot do an energy transition without a raw materials transition. And you do need circularity also to get this transition at work. There's the agricultural food transition, about not using the soil as an expense, but enrich the soil with more agriculture, more sustainable agricultural practices. A spatial transition is needed because we need redefine, in fact, space between nature, urban systems, but also agriculture. Agriculture has to be much smaller in the future, but then much more producing for a healthy society. Then, of course, these are the soft transitions, the financial, the educational transition, the healthcare transition, the social transitions. These are all specified transitions in our system, which in financial is not financial for its as a mean in itself, becomes a means for society. And also the healthcare transition is a transition from a market-based economy-style health market into a more market for society. In the social transition, we also go from different phases throughout history, and we all need our path through these transitions. The democratic transition at the end is also called the mother of all transitions by Jan Rotmans, because it actually is within our system. It is in our political system, and we may have to change the constitution even, because his vision also of a political system in the future it's actually leaving out a national scale. He says there's local, there's regional, and there's international, and we may not be using, in fact, this national scale, because for our circular transitions we need local and regional transports, and we need some policy making, in fact, on the international scale. Okay, so then Sapiens, what is needed for a sustainable future? We heard that Sapiens, what is needed. It was a museum. It will have a debate center, and it's the workspace of the Anthropocene. We will work about eco-designs, transformational solutions that build on principles of SDGs, but also of the transitions, and also to go out into the neighborhood. So we also need to contact our local businesses in the Zuidas. It's one of the highest and most expensive places in the Netherlands, but we need to contact all those people around us to say is that, hey, Sapiens is here, and say these are the transitions you can pick from, in fact, in our thing. So our objective is to become the center of sustainability, of transformative power in the Zuidas and beyond. So we also need bottom-up examples, some examples from the Embassy of the North Sea, which I like very much. Actually, I did one of their excursions last year in Oerol. And there's the Ministry of the Future. There's also the Citizen Assembly. These are all examples of bottom-up approaches which come up for societal responsibility. So just to conclude this talk, the Anthropocene is also there, could be there also to reinstate our significance, awareness, and responsibility of us humans working on this planet. And I know there's a lot of discussion about it, but when the Anthropocene is official, we might have seen another sort of awareness of it. So, and of course, are humans a geological superpower? Are we Superman? Can we even revert climate change? Can we live in the 21st century? We need to transgress, we need to work on these planetary boundaries. Johan Rockström published more than 10 years ago his first version, and then we overstepped 3 or 4 of these planetary boundaries. Now it's even 6 or 7 we overstep. So we really need to be aware of this. It needs to be put in our education, it needs to be put in our awareness also. This is the things which are now at stake. Okay, so I think we can use the power, the knowledge we have as Homo sapiens to restore also natural human ecosystem on planet Earth. This Sapiens could advocate that in the workspace of the youth to create practical, theoretical solutions to challenges of our time. And in transition terms, in fact, we actually are creating human cells and groups to decompose old industries and activate new emerging developments. You can see here, this is basically the way how the old industry is going down, is phasing out, and this is the experimentation emergence phase back of the new industries or the new emerging parts which are going up. And these are by Drift or by Dirk Loorbach also formulated stages in this sort of changing between decomposition and emergence, in fact, of the transition force. Okay, to conclude, the Anthropocene should be recognized as Homo sapiens with a superpower. We are a superpower at the moment. We do a lot of bad things. We could also do a lot of good things to the Earth. So we walk up with our first collaboration event towards the main collaboration event, which will happen in the summer. And what is needed, we will collaboratively drive progress on the 17 SDGs and the 10 transition paths. And as I heard recently on the climate debate, we need to move 5 times faster than we are doing now. So that's one of the deals, to inspire this vision of the Anthropocene, as well as to connect people across disciplines for transformative actions. Thank you. Okay, so we're up for debate. So I guess questions can be also be, before we do the debate, with our panelists. Camille?
Thank you, Sturt, for a great presentation here. It's good to kind of remind ourselves it seems like a very big, complex problem, but it's also actually quite simple, and we have a lot of agency in the processes that we drive, and that's kind of the motivation towards our panel discussion that we're about to have. I think in this sort of transformative space, I think we all kind of agree on the end goals that it is that we're trying to achieve, zero hunger, healthy ecosystems, safe environments, but there seems to be a lot of different solutions that are often proposed in isolation from one another when there's actually a lot of complementarity. And so what we wanted to do was put together a group of panelists, and I invite you to come and take a seat here, who each work on in transformative spaces, but from different disciplinary backgrounds. And each scientist is actually quite interdisciplinary, but broadly speaking, we've selected these 3 to represent societal, economic, and political backgrounds. So without further ado, I will introduce them here, and then we'll have some time at the end for more active dialogue with the audience. And we have a catchbox mic, which you just throw at each other, and then you can all ask your questions. Should be fun. Hopefully nobody gets injured in the process. So in the center, we have Paul Behrens. Paul Behrens is an author and academic in environmental change at Leiden University. His popular science book, The Best of Times, Worst of Times, Futures from the Frontiers of Climate Science, describes humanity's current trajectory and possible futures in paired chapters of pessimism and hope. He is also the editor and author of Food and Sustainability, a textbook published by Oxford University Press, and his research and writing has appeared in a diversity of scientific journals and other media outlets, from PNAS to the New York Times and the BBC, and he has also inspired many through his TED Talk. Olivia Reagan, on your left, is a socio-ecological economist with a specialization in multi-level governance. She has coordinated and co-edited Degrowth Vienna's new book called Degrowth and Strategy, How to Bring About a Socio-Ecological Transformation, which was published with Mayfly Books in July. In addition to her activist work in the degrowth movement, she has researched lobbying in the context of European Green Deal, and is currently looking into learning processes for socio-ecologically responsible urban futures. And then, of course, we have our very own Ina Lehmann, who is an assistant professor of governance and of global biodiversity in the Department of Environmental Policy Analysis here at the Institute of Environmental Studies at the VU. Her research interests include the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity from local to global governance levels, as well as various linkages between biodiversity and development policies. To date, she has notably analyzed these matters from an environmental justice perspective, covering justice's requirements regarding distribution, participation, and recognition. More recently, her research focus is increasingly turning to global policy integration of biodiversity considerations in the production sectors of agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture. And Ina is also an associate researcher at the German Institute of Development and Sustainability, collaborating on matters of conservation and development, as well as sustainable marine and coastal governance. All right, so Stuart and I will be moderating a very organic discussion. I don't know if you want to chair, Stuart.
Thank you, Camille.
No worries. But I suppose we will start with maybe just a little bit of problem framing. If you each want to go through and just define what is unsustainable about our system now, what are some of the biggest challenges that we're going to have to overcome, because I think that how we frame the problem is also quite relevant for how we frame solutions moving forward. So maybe, Paul, do you want to kick us off on that front?
Sure. So that's big. I mean, in a sense, everything's going wrong, but we've got to break that down into elements and look at what we can do to actually get to this future. I think there's a lot of agreement on where we want to end up, but that transition there, I mean, I have no doubt that we would eventually get an energy transition, that we'd eventually get a food transition, that we'd eventually get to all of this, but whether we can do it fast enough to avoid some of the really catastrophic impacts, we're on a timer here, and the timer is really where the problem is. So in describing this vision of the future where this clock is counting down and things are getting much worse, and we're going to have a very bumpy couple of decades no matter what happens now. Honestly, it's quite a scary couple of decades coming up. Everything that we know we need to do anyway will allow us to cope better for that, will give us more resilience, will address these problems, and will maybe even, for some of the unluckiest in society already, make their lives better. So we've got to keep these two things in perspective at the same time, and I'll let other people talk about some of the other systems that are driving this.
Great, thanks. Really speaking to how we use our land systems, in particular food and energy, and really focusing on that time constraint that we're working with. Maybe Olivia, do you want to speak to our economy and the kind of the processes that drive these unsustainable land use patterns?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think it was actually quite a nice example, the introduction presentation we just saw. We see that planetary boundaries have been partially overshot. We see that human beings have left immense destruction on this planet. Not all human beings, of course, mostly human beings in the global north, of course. And then I always find it dangerous to speak about human beings rather than about systems in which they are embedded, because systems often don't leave any other option than act according to certain requirements. And the system I would like to foreground in this regard is the globalized, capitalized economy that is growth-based and that essentially thrives on the extraction of natural resources, that thrives on labor exploitation, and that thrives on expansionism. So in order to keep itself stable, in order to function, because these growth-based economies are also deeply interlinked with social systems. So often healthcare is connected to growth-based systems, the supply of labor, and so on and so forth. In order to remain stable, they have to grow. But we do know there is a lot of scientific evidence that whenever there is economic growth, there is resource depletion and there is labor exploitation. And it is. I'm very glad that the SDGs are here in principle. I agree with all of them except for SDG 8, and that says we need, which is, in my perception, entirely contradictory. We need, of course, take care of ecosystems, make sure poverty is reduced, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we take economic growth as a given, and this contradiction needs to be overcome.
So really, within our current sort of neoliberal economy, people and landscapes have become pools of resource to exploit rather than the ends where well-being needs to be achieved. So we're kind of a backward process here, in a sense. Ina, do you want to speak to the sort of governance models that support these negative systems, and maybe you can also start shifting towards solutions of what would responsible policy look like to kind of like move us towards these
well, that's
big questions, I know.
That's a really big question. I think I would like to pick up on one point that Livia made about this systemic perspective, because I think in many ways one problem of governance that we have is that governance in many ways is pretty much siloed. So you mentioned, for example, health and the environment, and health governance is in many ways, for example, separate from environmental governance, from economic governance, and like that. And I think maybe briefly already going in the direction of solutions, what we really need to think about is how we have less siloed and more integrated governance. So also the sustainable development goals, there's so many interlinkages between them, but they are not necessarily governed in an interlinked way. And I think that's really where we need to go to.
What does that look like?
What does that look like? For example, at the national level, it would definitely mean that ministries talk more to each other, that different departments within one ministry talk more to each other. But I don't know what about the local level in Amsterdam, but also there I think there would be many ways that different city departments could talk more to each other. We are practicing in science, we need to practice more interdisciplinary science, all of that. And also at the global level, I mean, we have this year, or in a couple of weeks, there will be the next Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And in December, we will have the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. And how do these talk to each other? What are the concepts to bridge the gap between biodiversity governance and climate governance across scales? I think that's the way we need to think about it. And maybe thinking about also, as you were asking about solutions, not only ministries talking to each other at the national level, but also at the global level. How do we cross-fertilize these processes? Can we have joint conferences of the parties? All of these questions, I think, would be one way, or addressing them would be one way forward.
Maybe moving the whole multilateral process from an event a year to a broader diplomatic or democratic discussion throughout the year, perhaps. Yeah. Just sort of engaging.
That could be part of that process.
I have a question for Ina, because you study also sustainable use of biodiversity, also from local to global scale levels. That's one of your research topics. So what do you give, what we're now discussing, what do you think of Jan Rotman's proposal just to get rid of the national scale in politics? He says it differently, of course, more nicely, but actually the national scale may become irrelevant when we work globally. What do you think of that?
I'm not sure really whether we can completely get rid of that level.
Unimportant anymore.
Sorry?
Not so relevant anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is in fact a movement that, for example, well, city networks are emerging in climate governance, in biodiversity governance, and of course most of the action has to take place on the ground. So I think it's also good that these networks emerge and that they get more political importance. Still, I don't think that we should even maybe think about completely disempowering the national state, because of course this has some political legitimacy. It's the actor that we have right now that can make binding solutions. So I would not see the alternative at the moment, really.
At the moment, not. No. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe picking up on your comment about action on the ground, maybe we can move to Paul, and you've also been quite vocal about, we have solutions, we have like a lot of different mechanisms for creating more sustainable landscapes and societies, and what does that action look like to you? What would a pathway towards these goals look like?
Yeah, so the way I sort of look at it is, people sort of say carbon tunnel vision as if it's a problem. I mean, in a lot of cases, it addresses many, many other things. If I'm a physicist, so I'm always looking at sort of where are the big opportunities, where are the biggest areas that we can move fastest to make the biggest change in the 7 years that we have to actually reduce emissions by 50%, reverse biodiversity, save land. And when you actually look at the different systems, it's quite clear. The energy system, we can electrify around 70% of it already. We can do that with cheap wind and solar. Storage is not the issue we thought it once was, although there are going to be some issues for seasonal storage, but that's in the last 30%. So that 70% is already possible. And that's a huge amount of emissions. That's a huge amount of future biodiversity loss, and also current biodiversity loss, and air pollution, and power, and all sorts of different things, the problems that we have. The food system. The food system, every single study that you look at, you need a great food transformation. And that great food transformation is a shift to plant-based diets, or at least getting rid of meat, a reduction in waste, and production changes. But when you look at what the options are in those three, dietary change over and over and over again is the biggest one. This is coming from somebody who used to eat meat and things. It's not some extreme view. It is just something that needs to happen, and it's what we can make changes with. Because the faster we go in societies and technology, the faster we move. It has a feedback effect. So one of the reasons why renewable energy now is cheaper to buy new than to continue to operate coal and gas power station. But it didn't get that way, out of thin air. It got that way because countries like Germany said, we don't care, we've got a vision for the future, for our energy vendor, we're going to put in feed-in tariffs. And you can criticize a lot of stuff about other areas of German energy policy, but that allowed us to deploy solar to make it cheap and make it available. We need to hit the demand side, the innovation, everything as well, and we have those solutions too. So, some of our works, for example, suggest that if you had the entirety of the high-income world move towards plant-based diets, we'd save an area of land the size of the EU. That's a huge amount of land. We've got work coming out in a couple of weeks looking at Ukraine and Russia. You could absorb the entire production losses of Ukraine and Russia with Europe alone going plant-based. So it improves our resilience, it improves the freedom of land. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm often in the countryside, in most countries, I feel claustrophobic. This is not my land. This is 70% farmland, most of which is for animal agriculture. So we reclaim all of that for our local societies too, and have better access to nature, lower incidence of antimicrobial resistance, lower viral pandemics. I mean, I don't need to sort of convince you guys for this. It's a big driver of air pollution, water pollution, and these sorts of things. But to have a just transition, we need to really focus on how are we going to help people make choices on the production side that's going to be good for them as well. So how are they going to change? How are they going to rewild? One thing I forgot to mention is if we go plant-based in high-income nations and we rewild that land, we can draw down about 90 gigatons of carbon dioxide, which is about 12 years of global agricultural emissions. So it's just huge amounts. So when I'm looking at the biggest leverage points, if you're, we were saying about students who could work in the future in different areas, if you can make a 1% difference in those areas, you've made a huge difference overall. So yeah, I mean, very specific things that we can do.
Which is quite encouraging to think about the amount of influence we do have as consumers and where we hear this story over and over again, and it kind of can get tiring that, if we just shop here and not there, that's what needs to make the difference. But there is influence in that. And you were mentioning earlier the critical mass for actually creating these changes or real changes in production are actually quite low as well. Like it doesn't take a lot of people to
Yeah, it depends on your theory of change. I mean, I'm very much of the theory of change that it takes people on the ground. I mean, because you say okay, Paul, the really great stuff. Why isn't that happening already? If it's all of that's true, and all of that isn't happening already because of the existing politics and situation. I mean, countries are still burning coal because of the political power of coal in that country, and sometimes we've got solutions like in South Africa during COP26, where other countries decided they will bail out the South African coal industry and shut it down because renewables was just cheaper, but they couldn't do it in the politics that they had. They needed the bung of money. It's the same thing that's happened in Germany, the same thing that's happened in Spain. So that's some of the things. In terms of, the tipping points, getting carried away. If you look into the sort of the research on habits, it's different when you talk about people on the streets and habits. So if you talk about changing the norms of society, the tipping point is generally between about 15 to 40%. So you need about 15 to 40% adopting the minority activity to flip the majority. So you could think about things like plant-based diets there, that sort of stuff. If you're looking at revolutions, you know, there's some big controversy around it, but it's much lower than that. So if you talk about people actively on the streets causing disruption, the number is about 3.5. There's some discussion about whether that's, you know, it's lower if it's violent protest, non-violent protests, but it's about 3.5%. So very small numbers can make big differences. You get these tipping points.
Yeah.
Maybe, Livia, do you want to speak to that interaction in between consumer behavior driving different systems of production and how a more responsible economy could really facilitate the translation onto the landscape around us?
Okay, I have many thoughts on this. I think that... okay, so I think it depends on the sector about which we are talking. In principle, I think that, so when we talk about plant-based food, I think that's more than fair to appeal to people and say, hey, maybe you could rethink your, you know, eating behavior, and it won't be a big thing. It won't discriminate between different classes. It will. It's something that's more or less easily implementable. Yet, in general, degrowth perspective would be that rather than appealing to individuals, the problems are system inherent. So it might not be the case in, say, in Central European countries, but when looking at the US, it can be very difficult for people to access fresh food, for example. You know, they might have a fast food restaurant close to their place, but they might have actual difficulty accessing fresh veggies. So appealing to those people to change their diet will be tricky, and that requires an infrastructural shift. That requires, for example, states or municipalities providing the infrastructure for people to make reasonable and ethically viable choices. So I think it has to go hand in hand. If there's just sort of like appeal to individual behavior without the infrastructures, it will be very difficult. It will discriminate between different classes, and especially. And in some cases, unfortunately, it's impossible to act ethically because your infrastructure doesn't allow you to. Say I live in the countryside and I need to bring my kids to school, but there's no public transport system. You know, how would I get there other than taking a car, which I don't have? I think so that's the thing. Also. When talking about the energy transition, I think the danger there is that we tend to overlook where the raw material comes from for producing renewable energy. So when discussing solar panels, when discussing PV cells, these all require input rare earths that come from the global south. So we in the global north might have enjoyed the privilege of thinking about how we design our energy system in different ways. But actually, the question we should potentially be thinking about is how can we design our energy system in a new way that at the same time doesn't potentially prolong colonial tendencies, you know? Who is going to get the rare earth out of a mine? It often involves child labor. These are things we don't see here locally. And I think that opens up questions not only in terms of energy transition, but also in terms of energy usage. The level to which we are using energy, is that really necessary? Is it necessary to, you know, heat and cool, for example, gyms all day, night and day long? Are there areas in which it's possible to reduce energy, and how much energy do we actually deserve to use in countries of the global north if it means that we do that with the input in terms of labor and resources of people in the global south, and thereby actually act in a new colonial way?
Yeah,
So
great. Now really I understand you, Olivia, because I think I have the same sort of script also ready. But just given also the research you've done with your team also in Vienna on degrowth strategies. So if we think about the Sapiens team, which will be led in 6 months of now, we'll be roaming through Zuidas and trying to talk to people and talk to businesses. And so what can you advise them? What should they do, in fact, or how can they maybe implement tipping point strategies?
So if I understand it correctly, your addressee would be businesses mostly.
It's, well, have you been to the Zuidas, or?
Not yet. No.
It's businesses, it's law firms, it's banks, it's restaurants, it's shop owners, it's there are even schools, I believe, or there are people, residents, there's also people living there. So it's a whole mix of, it's a city part, but mainly focused on the business side, and they want to rival with London City, I think,
So, okay, I'm not sure this will be helpful for you, what I'm going to say now, but I think the degrowth perspective sort of like operates on it's sort of like a meta-analysis, basically, you know. Why do, so the businesses you will be talking to, unfortunately find themselves in a market. They have to make sure they compete, they have to make sure they they are innovative, you know, all of that anyhow. And what we are trying to, an idea we're trying to throw out as the degrowth community is to pose this fundamental question of, should the provision of essential goods such as energy and food and water and healthcare and education, should this even be subject to market dynamics, to competition and so on and so forth? Or shouldn't that be something that should be provided publicly and ensure everyone has access to it? And then it's the task of public authorities to think about how to essentially which policies will be necessary to supply these basic services in a way that everyone can lead a good life, but we also do not overshoot the planetary boundaries. In the current system in which we find ourselves, I would agree with you that it's very difficult for businesses themselves. Of course, they could, you know, think about ethical supply chains. That, of course, will, however, because they are so pressured to make profits, make them less competitive in contrast to other businesses. And the question is, can supply chains that involve the extraction of resources in the global south ever be ethical? A colleague of mine who's from Brazil says no. His stance would be people in the global north should simply stop extracting resources from countries in the global south and see which resources there are locally they can use to...
That's the circular transition again, and the raw materials transition you're talking about, yeah. Because they really say that it's really tied. It's tied to the effect to the energy transition. So you cannot see them independently from each other.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
Something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, so no, I totally agree. You know, and so when you look at these things aren't either or. So any individual change feeds back into the system, any system change feeds back into the individual options. So I totally agree, you know. And so we've got this sort of, I totally agree that, you know, a lot of people don't have this access, but if more people then adopt it that do have that access, then it changes the whole landscape dynamic, the choice architecture that people have, I think. And,
it seems like policy would play a key role in this. Maybe we have the consumer demand and the public support for healthy ecosystems, healthy food. We have challenges in our current economy that maybe prevent businesses from transitioning to more sustainable practices. So it seems like policy and sustainable governance is really key for protecting businesses and farmers and healthcare practitioners from market dynamics, maybe as a key stepping stone maybe towards achieving these goals.
I mean, definitely policy is very important because it sets the legal boundaries, at least in the national context. So it sets the boundaries of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and also, how, for example, it could set standards how companies have to report. I think Christian maybe will talk more about company reporting. I don't know, but they had this idea of, you know, companies reporting towards the global common good, and you can make this, of course, a legal standard. So in that sense, of course, policy is very important because it sets the context. And also, I mean, Livia mentioned, for example, global supply chains. I think there's quite some movement now, especially in the EU context, about deforestation-free supply chains and how this could be turned into European law. And there's quite some processes going on about supply chain legislation. Yeah. And I think that's really important to keep also for the broader public, when we're talking about policy making, it's also about increasing political pressure and creating the political will. I think political will is incredibly important in these processes. And of course, individual action is important, but individual action does not only have to be individual consumption action, but it could also be taking to the streets, participating in referenda, joining Fridays for Future demonstrations, and all of these things, signing petitions for deforestation-free supply chains, so that policymakers really are under pressure and feel this political will in their societies, because I think without political will, we won't get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Maybe adding to that, what are some key actions that scientists can make? I think that we produce a lot of really good science that really feeds into solutions and building very actionable pathways to these futures. But what is the barrier in between science and policy, or how does that become more porous and democratic?
Are you asking me or everybody?
Oh, anyone, but okay. You might have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think science, of course, has a very important role to play in terms of, first of all, providing the relevant information, and so that this political will can also form around the information that we provide. And then, of course, science policy interfaces are incredibly important. And Serge, you had here on your slides a reference to the IPCC. Yeah. That, of course, is a global science policy interface, which I think has incredible traction by now. And
it comes every year now, IPCC, I think, right? The reports are reporting almost.
Yeah, and there's special
1 or 2 years,
reports.
Special reports. They also divide their reports also like 3 times a year, also to get more impact. Also in IPCC, they learn how to publish their results to make more impact to the public. Public policy report, public report, scientific report, I think. They have these different things, yeah. Maybe it's good also to ask the room, yeah?
Let's
some questions maybe from the audience.
Open up.
Because you may have heard all these terrible things. Oh, there's one. Let's first, the microphone.
How do I turn this on?
The box, yeah. There's a question over here.
It's on. Okay, let's go bananas with some questions.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I just always wanted to use one of those and throw it, so that's why I got it. So I have it. But I will ask a question first. Actually, I would say thanks a lot to the panel. I want to thank you for not answering all the questions, because otherwise we wouldn't have to do Sapiens, right? If you knew all the answers, then we wouldn't need to go do all of this. So I think we already see it's incredibly difficult, because we always trying to circle around where do you need to start. Is it the individual and the system, and it's both. But I think we're making little baby steps, which is really, really good to see. So I have 2 comments. One is really just a reflection, the other is a question. My first reflection would be on the plant-based idea. I think this is a really, really straightforward way to change a lot, but there's incredible resistance against the idea in many quarters. And it has to do with prices, right? So, as you said, we actually only need to make or give those that would lose a lot of money, and they would stop doing that, right? So we would give the Dutch farmers a couple billions, and they would stop putting nitrogen out there, and then there wouldn't be a debate. But to get that money, we need economic growth. And there's the problem, because politicians look at it that way. And there seems to be, don't answer yet, a contradiction. So maybe you can explain that. And the other thing is I heard from Ina, and that's really nice to hear actually, that it's all politics in the end. Because I mentioned Italy today in my speech, if you listen just in passing. We have a fascist government in Italy. We have, let's say, questionable government in Sweden, and it's not getting better anywhere in Europe, and that's already the pinnacle of democracy and liberalism. So where do you take the hope from that it will be a public, rational vote that will bring in those parties into power that will then do all the things that we just said we need to do? Because I cannot see that. So maybe you can help me out in understanding how we can make that political will. I see there's a lot of policy capture. And can I throw it now?
You can throw it, yeah, sure. Maybe you can answer. Yeah, sure, let's comment.
You want it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm really bad at throwing. Are you good at catching? Are you good? Yeah.
Okay. Good. Philip, you stole my question, which is good. Hi. Am I talking to the right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
You can hear you. Yeah.
This is funny. It's not an SDG ball though. You should work on that, I think. Anyways, hey, really thanks a lot for a very interesting panel and for organizing all of this. My question is very much on the line of democracy, because being from Sweden, or just also coming back from Italy, the winds are, in one way, we're going into the right direction. There is a green wave in Europe and in liberal democracy, but that's mainly at the expense of maybe socialist parties, which are diminishing. The bigger wave, I think, is a right-wing wave, and it's not, the classic right-wing parties, but a lot of even more right-wing parties gaining a lot of traction. Sweden, where I'm from, of course, being the latest example, and their environment is not on their top priority. But many of the transitions that you talk about, and also I think Rotmans, etc., just demand really heavy state intervention. So what hope is there for like a liberal democracy to generate these changes? Because often I hear more democracy is needed, but I'm like, well, should we just have parts of them involved, of the population? Then that then suddenly goes against the grain. Yeah. So what's the role of liberal democracy in all the changes that you want to accomplish? Should I throw this again? Or?
Yeah, you can throw it to me.
To you?
Why not? Okay.
I'm not sure which one of you want to start, but I think that we should
over around there. Yeah.
speak to these first, maybe before we pile on
a
more
small
questions.
response, maybe, to comments, because I think citizen assemblies, which I presented, are like the answer. So, if a liberal democracy is functioning, we can have in multiple countries has been successful also in implying citizen assemblies, which can have a different sort of government, a different sort of influence also, which tends to be not depoliticized in one way.
The thing with the citizen assemblies is it shows what the polling shows and what the surveys show, which is people are further on than we think people are on the subject. So if you look at the Citizens' Assembly in the UK, where they talked to 108 people from across the country, all sorts of different backgrounds, and they said, we've got this problem, how do you want to fix it? By the end of it, they were saying, let's ban SUVs, frequent flyer levies, let's get rid of I mean, ridiculous stuff, way beyond where the politics is at. People are really there, so it's sort of how you harness that. I totally agree with you. It's very scary the way in which the politics can be harnessed for these different outcomes. But if you're able to have these democratic structures with these citizens' assemblies, then it's feasible, and people are way beyond where the politics are at.
It's a question up there. Yeah.
Hi, great to see that the theme of Sapiens is collaborative action. I have a question about collaborative action. Olsen described the dynamics of collaborative action already in his book, and Ostrom gave some very specific factors that are required for collaborative action, such as a law system. The examples given in the book are all hyper-local, for example, fisheries or fresh water use in the mountains. My question is, the big collective action problem we are facing, climate change and also other collective action problems, are global. And on a global perspective, these hyper-local problems are extremely easy. On a global level, we don't have a law system. We don't have many of the things that are hyper-local, for example, a lot of social interactions. How do we tackle global collaborative action problems?
Sorry. The money thing. The money's there. The money's there for the agriculture. We've got the subsidies. We're just paying it for the wrong things. So we're paying it for land and clearing it rather than rewilding and biodiversity. Sorry, don't want to hog.
Maybe could I briefly add on the money question, because I think that this is also a narrative that is can be easily used to create these artificial binaries that don't exist. We can either solve social issues or ecological issues. You know, if we don't grow the economy, there won't be jobs, or these kind of things. And I think that is a sort of binary thinking that serves certain groups that currently are in power and don't want to make any changes. I don't think there's such a thing as too little money. I think it's a matter of how it's distributed. And when we look at global inequality, or when we look at inequality within the global north, it is striking how the top 1% or how the top 10%, how much they own, it's entirely unnecessary. Nobody needs that. They own several houses, have luxury products as a standard go-to product. I think we need to fundamentally pose the question, which kind of level of wealth is ethical in this world, given that some people starve, and given that this wealth is built on the back of people who are now struggling a lot, and who feel the repercussions of the climate crisis immensely. So I think it's a matter of distribution. There's, very old and simple, but wealth tax and income taxes. But I understand that, of course, the people who sit in politics are the same that probably don't want to have their own wealth being taxed, right? So I think it boils down to building a critical mass that can see this issue, that can become aware of inequality. And some people would also argue that the right-wing backlash is actually a response to the striking inequality we find in society. And this is merely a reflection of the fact that certain segments of society don't feel like they have anything to say, they don't own anything, and they don't have a good life, and are just working 24/7 in a shitty job, and of course, then cast protest votes, which shouldn't be surprising. Yeah.
Okay. Was a question up there?
But maybe...
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the global level.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Maybe you can first answer the question that was already asked.
Maybe you can ask again.
Okay, take the microphone then. Yeah.
Does anybody want to speak to collaborative action at the global scale?
Yeah, I'm sure I cannot answer your question, but I can speak to it maybe. And I think this raises a very important, even higher level point, because I think we really also need to talk about trade-offs when we talk about sustainability and sustainability solutions. And I know this is to be a solution-oriented space, so I'm sorry if I drop some water into the wine, but I think we also need to really take into account that maybe at some point we won't resolve all the tensions. And I think what you mentioned really is a tension. So I do think that at the global level, we do not have the same kind of, what you said, community-based collective action that we can have at the local level. So, and in that sense, also getting back to what Philip said about where do we get the optimism from, I'm not overly optimistic that we can overcome all of these tensions, and that also that political will create all the solutions, because, as you said, the political will is not there. It's not always there at the local level. It's certainly not always there at the global level. And I think we really need to talk about, trade-offs. How do we get from collective action problems, or that there is a trade-off between like the scale at which we are addressing problems. So obviously climate change, biodiversity loss, and so on are global level problems, and they need to be addressed at the global level, but they also need to be addressed at other levels. And collective action, maybe like the Ostrom type of collective action that you mentioned, is not possible in the same way at the global level as at the local level.
Maybe launching off of that, Ina, do you think that it would be enough to at least alleviate some of the pressures through changes in our sort of European economy and consumption patterns if we stopped needing so much rainforest to produce soy for beef, that would at least free up some space for local democratic solutions in those spaces, and removing the pressures might be enough?
Enough is maybe difficult.
Well, enough is wrong. Might be something, might be...
To some extent, maybe, but enough, I would doubt.
Can I give an example of a very small step that can happen at a global level? And that's something like the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which levies carbon coming into Europe. And the studies that look at carbon tax show that patchworks of little carbon taxes around the world, there's an incentive for all the countries to adopt that price. And so you can get international legislation that's quite sort of economically directed from patchwork. Not enough, not going to address anywhere near enough, but these are small steps along a road that might actually help. So just to give one example of how it could, these things can work.
Yeah. There's a couple questions there. Now first there, then there.
Thank you all so far, but I want to just challenge a little bit this assumption that it's easy to transit to a plant-based nutrition, because food is more than just caloric nutrition requirements. So what's the role of citizens on it? Like, should we just say to Brazilians or people from Argentina and Uruguay, okay, we know that barbecues are quite important in your social life and part of our identity, but sorry, no barbecues anymore?
Yeah, well, just really quickly. So that's why I focus a lot on very high-income nations where a lot of plant-based proteins are available. So if it's actually required for nutrition, then I don't tend to look at that. But the huge opportunities in high-income nations are just massive on their own. In terms of the cultural thing, I mean, my messaging is usually, you don't have to go all the way. Even just cutting down helps. And by cutting down, you also encourage other options that come.
Meatless Mondays, right?
Meatless Mondays, all these sorts of things.
Okay. Other questions over there? Yeah, microphone box.
Want to throw it to the front?
I'll try.
Maybe in the meantime, yeah.
Heads up.
Almost there.
Yay! Yeah, so I wanted to push a little bit on the democracy question because we heard a lot on this sort of like systemic approaches and where are the leverage points in those systems. And what I would like to hear is like where are the leverage points in the governance system? Because, for example, I hear all these debates of, okay, basically what happens, but like provided that there's democracy, right? But we see this democracy decline, and I see, for example, right now following the Brazilian elections, and reading some quotes that Bolsonaro has said on climate change, it really goes back to climate change denialism. And I mean, same with Trump, right? And so I wonder, isn't there like one of these like high leverage points in a democratic system to have some sort of solution towards this post-truth era that we're living, where it would be clear what is good for the common good and what not. And I'm gonna pass the mic right here. I don't need to throw it.
Okay. Yeah, I think education.
I think there are some suggestions. I'm definitely not a legal expert, but there's some suggestions to basically ensure that in constitutional law, there's sentences that basically ensure that whatever political decision is made, it acts in the interest of future generations. This could be a clause that could ensure that, and you could, of course, specify that more for different areas and for different sectors. I think we have to be aware that people like Bolsonaro have been embedded in a globalized neoliberal economy, and they politics and economics are not, the economy is not a separate thing, so there's deep entanglements, as you all know, between politics and the economy, and there's also partially the same interests. And I think that that's the dangerous thing, that when it's the main interest of politicians to increase profits, to increase trade relations, to make sure that a country has economic growth for the sake of economic growth, not for the sake of providing basic social provisioning to everyone, and to ensure that everyone has access to water, everyone has access to education, to food and so on, then something is wrong in the way we conceive of what an economy should do. Because the role of an economy is to provide for people and to serve to their basic needs, not to lead to odd science denialist behavior in order to justify some international trade relations from which nobody benefits, but a very few multinational corporations.
Is there a way to promote greater democracy from the bottom up?
I think, I think that certainly, so the political system is so complex that certainly there needs to be bottom-up encouragement. And I think, as Ina has mentioned, those can be small things like deciding to go to a protest, deciding to join a political debate or a political forum. And of course, we also heard about citizens' assemblies. These things have not really been institutionalized yet, but would be essential to institutionalize. And otherwise, I think there's also, of course, a lot of it is unfortunately discourse and communication, and this is incredibly so variable. So, yeah.
And maybe responding to the comment about how to have a just democracy, is there a way to use the Sustainable Development Goals as a top-down mechanism to ensure legitimacy of an argument or of a population's voice, do you think, Ina?
Top-down legitimacy. I mean, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals are like anchor points. That I think so, yes. But I mean, as Livia said in one of her statements, the Sustainable Development Goals as such, they are not uncontested. And maybe it's not even not only the 8th one about economic growth, but also in the other Sustainable Development Goals, there is quite some debate also about, are they ambitious, you know, do they cover the most important aspects, and so on and so forth. So I think, well, yes, they are an anchor point, and I mean, I think country reporting is directed towards the sustainability goals. So before, well, I can tell a story maybe. Before I was working at the VU, I worked at what was then called German Development Institute, now called German Institute for Development and Sustainability. And they are closely cooperating with the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And we also collaborated with them with providing expertise and providing papers and inputs, and their reporting is so much oriented towards the sustainability goals. So whatever we would deliver for them would be along the lines of the sustainability goals. So I think even in administrations, in bureaucracies, in ministries, they do have a lot of power and a lot of traction, but we shouldn't think they are a panacea, maybe.
Okay, there's 5 more. There's one question up there. He was first. You were first, right?
Here's the mic.
You were first, and then up there, and then here. Yeah, so 3 more. Okay, you first, yeah.
I'm so very curious to find out, if you look at companies, there you have seen a lot of new strategies emerging from very young people, agile and those kind of aspects. And if we look at progression within Europe, it took us from being a coal community with the Netherlands and Belgium and so on, 50 or 60 years to arrive at where we are now at the EU. So that's not very agile, it's not very quick. And I think there's urgency. So how do we enable young people with their talents, with their energy, with their qualities, with their way of looking integrated at issues, to become as agile in these areas as has happened recently in companies?
More Sapiens.
Well, I'm curious to find out from the panel.
You know, I don't see it as the companies moving very, very fast. Or I think the pressure comes internally from the people who are working in the companies and externally from the people who are asking for more. I mean, we talked about the information perspective just then. You know, a study out a couple of years ago showed that the majority of the top 100 videos on YouTube about climate change are climate denial. It's not good enough. And, you know, they're sometimes talking to me and they're saying, oh, we've got all these little tools and widgets and things. I said, no, I'm not interested in your widgets. You know, do what you have to do, which we know you all need to do. If you take yourself seriously, you should do that. Coming back to that point about what scientists should do, if you take your science, you know, seriously, if this is what it means, then show, you know, you've got to do some of the legwork in the activism, you've got to do some of the legwork in providing a way of your own habits, you know, not flying, eating plant-based meat, you know, really, you know, living it, because the change happens internally and externally. So if you're talking about these students coming out and joining companies, my biggest thing for them would be, okay, hold them to account. You know, if you're working at a media company, it's very good to look at your scope 3 emissions, but you're a service industry. I don't really care about your emissions that much. It's good, that's your minimum that you need to be doing. You know, what are you doing to say we're not going to take the contract to work with this company that's shown this way it involves itself in the power of countries and politics? And will you take the 5% hit on your bottom line not to do that? Because if you do that, then you live. And one final thing on that is what you often hear is companies saying, oh, we would move faster, but we're worried about, you know, the other people. We'll move faster if there's regulations for all of us. Well, if that's the case, then all the young students going into the companies or companies themselves can get together with their representative bodies, with their associations, and they can say, I mean, when they start doing that, that's the moment I'll take some of this stuff seriously, because otherwise it's just all wishy-washy, talk or accounting or offsetting or all this stuff. So, that's what I would say. This, the students coming out and joining these companies should be working on.
All right.
To the back, I think.
Very up there, yeah.
Very back.
In the meantime, we have about 5 more minutes, I think. Yeah, so... Yeah. So it needs to go up there, yeah. On the very right corner, up there. Just throw it in multiple stages. Yeah. Yes, it's one, okay. Yeah, okay. Row by row, yeah.
Thank you very much. This is one sure way to get the attention. Thank you very much. What a wonderful discussion. What Paul Berends just said reminds me of the need to embody the change that we strive for and of prefigurative politics and the like. But my question goes in a slightly, or my remark goes into a slightly different direction. So I think what underlies what has been said so far by all speakers is the imagination of a sustainable future. A certain, I think by and large we're looking at a shared imagination here. What I do wonder, however, is whether there are ways of enhancing this shared imagination as a catalyst for transformation. And that, of course, touches on worldviews, as imagination is always based on worldviews. And I do wonder what role the panel would see for the role of worldviews when it comes to imagining sustainable futures, specifically also for worldviews with a pre-modern outlook, which includes many religious ones, as such communities, such traditions take their point of departure often in a rather different view of human nature relationships than relating to nature as either food or foe. So I'm curious as to this underlying dimension of imagination, worldview, even religious worldview. And I'm looking forward to hearing and learning from your wisdom.
Thank you for your very complex question. Okay. Who wants to give a take? I can also start, but if you want, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things actually we had picked up from a climate debate, which was online, by the way, where there was 1.5 hours of debate on how to move faster with the climate change debate. At the end, they were only talking about narratives. These were evidence-based narratives or narratives without evidence-based, but narratives is maybe what is very important, of course, to tell the story to a broader audience, maybe to a global audience. And so it could be a new discipline, or it could be a new field, or it could be a new specialism to relate this story back to nature and to tell maybe where we come from or where we're supposed to be heading for.
I think that local vision is really important. I mean, we talk about the bottom-up governance and mentioning that, and this vision of what it's going to look like locally. Is it going to be droughts every year where everything turns yellow? Are we going to? What do we expect to see out of our front window? What do we expect to be able to enjoy from our lives? Both, our working day, what we're, this overconsumption that we've been talking about, and what does it look like to take the action that we need and also be resilient to the changes, because that's going to be really key. And both of those go together a lot. So I think, when I think about a vision for the future, I try to bring it quite local. And then that can basically slot into lots of different worldviews. So you can have the conservationism of sort of some of the more Judeo-Christian sort of ideas, or you can, the Pope recently talking about the encyclical. I'm not very religious, as you can see, encyclical. So I think it's sort of like anchoring each of those worldviews to that local region, so that people can really see what that vision would look like for them: more nature, more biodiversity, better resilience, cleaner air, cleaner water, being able to swim in streams, this sort of stuff.
Nice. Okay, we only have time for one question. And there was one question up front there. She was first. Yes, I think we really have to then postpone the rest of the discussion later on. But the last question over here.
Sure, I'm not sure who was next, but you know, so.
Yeah, okay, just throw it down. Yeah.
I can do so. I'm okay.
Here?
Yeah.
Maybe we can just
It's
add
bouncy, guys.
I also had a thought on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are talking about changing systems, but all the changes start in ourselves. So what can we do ourselves in our own neighborhood, in our own behavior daily, and then inspire others? I think that's the best way to do. And we talk then about community-led initiatives and how can also universities support this, and so that youngsters are inspired. And because I think the change is really needed with children and youngsters, because when they ask questions, also children, when they ask questions to their parents, why do we eat meat, or why do we still take the car instead of the bike, I think that can make the change as well.
Okay.
I'm going to challenge. I'm going to channel Catherine Ahejo and say more conversations outside your networks. If there are already people that speak, if you know everybody around you is already sold on it, then perhaps go and find some other people.
Yeah, you have to start yourself, and don't point to anyone else, but to yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I've sort of said the main ones is, if you look across the whole areas, insulation, transport, renewables, plant-based diets, and you're already most of the way for climate change.
Yeah, and also that I think it's very important that we are in the collective in areas and not with a view of 4 years of politicians to the new elections, but to have area visions for 20 or 50 or 100 years. So it will not change every 4 years. You have a good idea, like the farmers in the Netherlands in the moment is a great example. Change every 4 years, and then everything what was implemented is gone again.
We can take the mic back up at the front here, maybe.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Maybe is it possible to add to the question still, or are you
Sure,
planning on
if
closing?
you want to add to that? Then.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that you could do is get organized in some way. Join some local initiatives, join a social movement, connect with people around, and then I think what we fundamentally lack is exercises of reimagination. How do we actually imagine a different society, a different economy, and we sometimes don't have a clue about this because we are so stuck in the present, and we accept the status quo, and we accept, okay, we need to have economic growth, we need to make profits, we need to overwork ourselves, so we accept the status quo too much and don't radically challenge that. And then on the question the sir had above there, I think the separation between the natural and the social that was artificially created has served a certain purpose as well, such that obviously economic systems can exploit nature, can expropriate from it, can also religion does play a role in that. As the first lines of the Bible say already, use nature for your purposes. I'm sorry if I don't want to insult anyone here, but I think that's dangerous, of course. And I think that there should be different entry points, no matter, not everyone needs to be a philosopher to understand this, but to talk about the separation between the natural and the social, because there is actually no separation. Actually, this is deeply intertwined, and the social is contingent on the natural, and without nature, people die, Yeah.
Very well said.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we need to wrap up for time, but thank you all for such a very interesting discussion. I think we're leaving with... I'm sure we're leaving with more questions than we came in with. But hopefully this is just the start of the conversation. We can also network and continue this dialogue outside. We will all be sticking around for much more of the program. So what we're going to do next, we've just heard a really wonderful account for what sustainability looks like, what some potential pathways might be for getting there in the future, but if we want to actually start getting engaged now, we can already look around our community and see ways that people are actively engaging in change. So what we've done is we've pulled together just a small sample of people who are engaged in change, and we have a bit of a booth market out front to kind of showcase a few of these examples. So related to sustainable economy, we have Degrowth Vienna. Livia will actually be selling some copies of the new book, Degrowth and Strategy. We also have the Amsterdam Donut Coalition and the Economy for the Common Good, of course, related to our keynote speaker later. Related to food systems, we have ACEED, which is a local food co-op. In relation to education, we have Transforming Enterprise Education and Community Service Learning, as well as Climate Fresk. For activism, we have Extinction Rebellion. In terms of conservation and landscape management, we have Common Land. Sustainable business, we have SOS International and Green Office Movement. And then in terms of academia, we of course have the Amsterdam Sustainability Institute, as well as Sapiens. So we will be manning a booth. Please come with your ideas for ongoing programs that you would like to see kicked up with this initiative, and we can brainstorm how to move forward. But there's also going to be a tour to a sustainability-related art exhibit. If you want to cluster by the Sapiens booth along this wall at the far end, you can be taken for a tour, and there is one more that I'm forgetting. Nope.
It's on your list.
Sorry? Oh, come back at 5, because we're not done yet. But in the meantime, you can also grab some drinks and some snacks on the house. And I look forward to lots of exciting discussions.
We hope you had a fantastic time at the market and were able to connect with a lot of inspiring ideas and inspiring people. For now, I would like to give the floor to Shahad, who will introduce our keynote.
Yes. I'd like to move to the next part and introduce Christian Felber. As we said before, Christian is a writer, lecturer, and contemporary dancer. And he is initiator of the Economy of the Common Good movement and the Austrian project Bank of the Common Good. And he will tell us all about it. So please give him a big hand of applause.
Thank you. Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to contribute to this event, to this holistic event, to this post-anthropocentric event. Sjurt posed the question in his slides if humans have the capacity to take a post-anthropocentric worldview and internal attitude. And I think that's one of the necessary steps to overcome what we have created so far. And I recently participated in the first WEF, alternative WEF in Switzerland, you know, the World Ethics Forum. And not so many people as in Davos gathered in Pontresina, but we gathered, and really from all over the globe. And we agreed in a first step on a new ethos, which is post-anthropocentric, post-colonial, and post-patriarchal. That was one hopeful a sign of hope. And we try to contribute that humans become really sapiens, of course, because can we call a species sapiens that is the only species that is destroying its own foundations of life? I think that's then not an adequate terminology. Maybe we will arrive there one day. And I think only if we take a post-anthropocentric worldview and internal attitude, we have the opportunity to be one day sapiens. Said that, I pick up another question: what is unsustainable at the moment? And I would say one of the major elements or trends or behaviors or patterns or paradigms that are unsustainable at the moment is that if you ask traditional graduates from economic studies or business schools what is the goal of the economy, they would not say it's the 17 SDGs. Maybe except the 8. What would they say? See, it's a totally different answer, totally different. If you ask business people from the global economy, what's the purpose of your company first and foremost? Yeah. So the goals of these economists and business people, they don't match with the society's goals. And as a consequence, we create a holistic landscape of crises. It's not one crisis, it's so many crises that I don't even dive into these crises, but I ask, where are these economic models that match with our society's goals, that match with deep sustainability and solidarity and justice and democracy and humanity and the greater common good? Here they are. And it's just a short list, but they all agree upon the slogan tapas instead of Tina. You know Tina, there is no alternative. Tapas, there are plenty of alternatives. And the list is, of course, longer. And the one I have the honor to present now, the economy for the common good, is just one of many alternatives. We try to offer a holistic alternative, which means different things. One meaning of holistic is that we do offer a complete and consistent theory of change, a narrative, a model consisting of 20 cornerstones. But at the same time, we started as a movement with companies, with individuals, of course, with politicians, with scientists, with humans from all walks of life. And we have created some 200 local chapters so far. The Dutch chapter is with a stand outside. I just learned, so you can visit. Here you are. We can visit them in the next break. And last but not least, we already talked about the decline of democracy, which is just one of the many crises. And I like to combine the theoretical analysis, which is the hypothesis of post-democracy of Colin Crouch, and the empirical data, which come from VU Varieties of Democracy of University of Gothenburg. And they have 4 classes of states, which liberal democracies is the best class, electoral democracy is the second best, electoral autocracy is the second worst, and the worst is a closed autocracy. And since 2010, we lost 10 out of 40 liberal democracies. This is a mega trend, it's a long-term mega trend. And and I think we should do deep and complex analysis why that. Austria was downgraded from a liberal democracy to electoral democracy this year. So I'm deeply affected, and as an alternative, we offer a better, a deeper, a stronger, a more participatory, and more direct democracy, which we call sovereign democracy. Why sovereign democracy? I'm a linguist, first and foremost. I'm not an economist, by the way. I'll tell you in a second. Because sovereign means literally to stand above all, and it refers to the highest instance in any state form. In a monarchy, the sovereign instance is the king or the queen, as we have just recently been reminded of. But in a democracy, the funeral of a 96-year-old woman, she was called the sovereign of Great Britain, which for a Democrat is quite surprising. In a democracy, the sovereign instance are the people and no one else. But it just means, and it clarifies who is actually the highest instance in a liberal democracy, and accordingly, what would be the consequence? And the consequences would be that we could do a lot more things than we are able to do today. But this is the last part of my talk, and I would like to start the talk with a couple of basic questions, which I would love to be clarified at the beginning of any study of economics, no matter if it's business administration, economics, or management, or trade. And, well, interestingly, the proper term economy is not always cleanly defined. What is defined immediately is markets, but not economy. We already heard an answer. It's about the satisfaction of basic need of humans, no matter if they are satisfied on markets or in commons, in households, or with public services and goods, for instance. And we would add in coherence with existing fundamental democratic values, which we already enumerated, from solidarity to sustainability to democracy, and of course within the ecological boundaries of the planet. Then we should be clear about the goal of economic activities, maybe that's our main contribution, and offer consistent metrics to measure the achievement of these democratically agreed goals, and ideally we would define these goals in a participatory democratic process. These are some proposals of our movement, and from there we start to look at the economy, to locate it in the broader picture, in the bigger picture. I already mentioned that I did not study economics, not because I'm not interested in economics. I'm deeply interested in economics, but in its broader context. And that's why I would have loved to study universal sciences, actually, and economics as one facet of the universal study or universal sciences, but that was not possible at Austrian universities at that time when I had to take that decision. And the university is an interesting institution which bears in its name the word universe, and universe comes from unum and versum in Latin and means literally one single verse, or there is only one science, the universal science. And of course, you can fragment this single science into disciplines, but you should always remain aware of the origin. And even if you specialize in a scientific branch, as we use the word, the branches should be aware of which is the bigger branch and which is the tree, the trunk of the tree, and which is the whole tree of the universal science. And only then it makes sense to go into details, if you remain connected to the whole. And then if a banker, for instance, is also at least a little bit of a philosopher and an ethicist and an ecologist and a gender expert and a political scientist and a psychologist and a sociologist, maybe a neurobiologist, then I'm sure this person is not able to do that much harm that she or he is able to do today if she or he is only specialized on finance. So some of the questions are, is the economy something isolated, or is it connected, embedded in broader and superordinated contexts, such as the democratic society or the cultural context with its long-standing values, and of course, planetary ecosystems. Just one example, the former German chancellor said literally, we need a market-conform democracy. What do we need? A market-conform, if something is conform with something else, that one that is conform is subordinated, and that with which it is conform is subordinate. So in a market-conform democracy, democracy is subordinated to markets, isn't it? What would be the alternative? The other way around, of course. A democracy-conform market. This is a democracy-conform market. And only if you pose this fundamental question, you can decide intelligently. I don't give you the answer. I ask you to think about it. If that was a good saying from that former federal chancellor of Germany. And to make a long story short, after having dedicated the necessary and worthy time to all these fundamental questions, we come to the conclusion at the end that the overarching goal of all economic activities should be the common good. Of course, that's a normative approach, but economics is essentially a moral science. You know who said that? It was John Maynard Keynes. Economics is essentially a moral science. And we will find a strong reason for that. Not all economists agree on that, but Keynes said that literally. Of course, you can have a different normative approach, which is the approach that economic activities are all about money. It's the economy stupid means that economy is about money stupids. and that the accumulation of capital is the goal of economic activities. But it's just a different normativity. This is not value-free. It's just a different value system. And if we remember some famous historians, but this choice is not taught everywhere. Sometimes economic education is just offering one option. A scientifically serious textbook would say the theory of enterprise says that an enterprise can be an organization which is trying to maximize financial profit, or it can be an organization which is trying to contribute to the common good as much as it can. And maybe there's a third option and a fourth option. These are the choices. Now, please choose. It's up to you to choose. But sometimes they only give one choice, and then this is where there is no alternative comes from. It's not coming from politics, actually. It's coming from quasi-natural science of neoclassical economics, I would dare to say. Instead of being historical and memorizing what already has been said, because Aristotle already differentiated these two alternative options. He did not say, there is only one and the other one doesn't exist. He said, there is one which I favor, and there's another one which I don't like so much. And the first one is oikonomia, which by his definition is an economy for the common good. Because, and now it's interesting, the rules in a household, nomoi, for the house, for the oikos, should be made in a way that a specific goal is achieved, and the specific goal is the well-being of all household members or the greater good, is a normative goal. But these rules are moral rules made by humans. That's extremely important, and this is even the etymological proof that economics is a social science and not a natural science. If it was a natural science, then it would have to be named ecology, because logos are the natural laws. Ecology is already occupied by a different, but that would be then economics as a natural science. And then Aristotle was quite precise and repetitive in emphasizing that the common good is the goal, and money, capital, and any material good is just the means. And we should have that clearly in mind. And if this relationship flips upside down, if money or any material good becomes the purpose of our strivings in the economy or even in arts, then it's not even economy anymore. It's not even economy anymore. It's turning the economy into its opposite, into krematistike. Spoken as a dancer, this would be krematistike. It's an option. You can choose to live like that. But it's something different from a pure oikonomia, just to get things clear. And Aristotle was not exotic. If you read more and deeper and thicker books, then we discover that actually considering the common good as the overarching goal of economic activities was not only for centuries the rule, but for millennia. That's important just to know. We can think differently today. We can choose differently today, but we should know and remember that for thousands of years, people thought differently, even in our culture. Yeah, I will not quote Adam Smith now because I want to come back to the present and now, very important detail, what do constitutions say, apart from economics textbooks? They say that, well, does the Bavarian Constitution say economic activity in its entirety serves the accumulation of capital? Then it would legitimate krematistike, or capitalism. But it doesn't. It legitimizes and justifies oikonomia very clearly. And oikonomia is the economy for the common good. And there is no exception from that rule. Not all constitutions are that explicit and that clear. But there is no single constitution that enshrines capitalism in its text. If constitutions say something about the role of capital, then they say very clearly, it's a means. Surprise, it's a means. And here is our main analytical contribution, accepting the proposal that success should always and everywhere be measured alongside the achievement of the goals, first and foremost, and not alongside the means. We propose that this habit, that custom to measure success is methodologically spoken not correct, because we are not measuring the achievement of the goal. We are measuring the availability or maybe even the accumulation of means. It's not correct in methodological ways. If we agree that the overarching goal is the common good, and that's what our constitutions say, what is relevant at the end of the day? What economics textbooks say or what constitutions say? We could clarify it. Yeah, we could clarify it and ask the citizens. And we have one prominent hint in that field, which is a representative survey of the German government in the recent years. They asked the population, do you want to continue with GDP, ceteris paribus, if all conditions are equal, or would you prefer to replace GDP as the highest benchmark of economic policy by something like a gross national happiness, for instance? And the answer of the survey, which was deemed as representative by the German government, was that 18% of the Germans voted for the continuation with GDP. 18%, whereas 67% of the surveyed people preferred to replace GDP by something like gross national happiness or a combination of SDGs. But now comes, politics, yes. And now, and who? Who defines what is the common good is the next question. The Queen, the Parliament, the government, the federal president, the prime minister. I would say the sovereign instance, because it's one of the most basic questions that we have to decide upon, and the more fundamental a question, the stronger the case for letting it decide the sovereign instance. And just to remember briefly again, who is the sovereign instance in a democracy? It's the people. And this is our proposal. So if we want to scale up one prototype that works at the local level in Amsterdam or any other community, at the regional level, at the national level, at the European level, and maybe at the international level, higher, then we propose to call for, you can call them citizen assemblies, you can call them economic conventions, you can call them differently, for participatory processes in which the citizens define together or compose the common good product, because it will consist of, let's say, 20 sub-goals, very similar to the SDGs, but created bottom-up. And I make the exercise. If you are this economic convention or assembly, and think about or feel inside, which is one of the components of these, of these 20 facets common good product, which you don't want to miss at all, which is most essential for you to be part of the greater good, the life, a good life for everybody. Which element, which component would you like to have been included? Gardens. Sorry? Gardens. Gardens, like green gardens. Gardens is one proposal, more proposals. Healthy food. Very similar to organic gardens. More proposals, please. Planetary boundaries, thank you. And mobility and social inclusion and freedom, peace, access to water, to drinkable water, I guess. Yeah, healthy water. Yeah. Can we agree on drinkable rivers? No, it's free energy. Hey. Free time, yeah? Time welfare, we can call it. And maybe one more. Animal welfare. Great. Okay, so we have heard 10, 12 proposals. Did anybody mention money? See, it's not that important for us. if we look at what really matters, nobody thinks about money or capital. Is never, never, ever mentioned nowhere in the world, neither in Europe nor in any other region or culture. Usually what is among the finalists is health and happiness and flourishing relationships and social cohesion and just distribution and stable ecosystems, including gardens and drinkable rivers and political participation and fundamental rights and freedoms and peace. Just to name a few examples, more or less these. And only if none of these sub-goals goes down, only then the common good product rises. So if the common good product rises, we have 100% guarantee that in this year, sorry, I jumped over one step. Having defined the goals, we need to operationalize them. That's necessary, that in order that we can measure the progress from year to year, and if we want to, we could compare between country and country. We could keep it simple, maybe 2, 3, or maximum 5 indicators, measurable indicators per sub-goal. Just one example, health was usually measured with life expectancy. In recent years, public health experts prefer to use healthy years of living, just to touch one indicator discussion. But healthy years of living you can measure, and this is an indicator. And then if the common good product grows, then we have 100% guarantee that in this year we are either healthier than last year, or happier, or more solidary, or more democratic, or more sustainable, or more peaceful, or we have a juster distribution and a lower degree of inequality. Just to name some examples. Whereas if GDP grows, do we have full certainty that any of these qualities has improved? No, we don't. And even in the worst case, it's possible that GDP keeps growing and all of these qualities deteriorate. And this is methodologically quite doubtful, isn't it? And it's not if we consider GDP as a success measurement of a capitalistic society. But the question is, do we want to be a capitalistic society? And constitutions have already given the answers. No, we don't want to be a capitalistic, we want to be an economic society. But for that reason, we have to distinguish between economics and capitalistic sciences, or oikonomia and grammatistike. Well, and once we have that beautifully composed common good product for Amsterdam, for the Netherlands, for the European Union, we could just easily derive the common good balance sheet for companies on the meso level, asking every organization, no matter if it's a university, it's a company, if it's the city of Amsterdam or the church, what's your contribution to these 20 democratically defined goals? And only because we haven't enjoyed this process, yes, this is our provisional proposal, how companies and other organizations can answer these questions. Our common good is provisionally defined by the combination of all fundamental democratic and constitutional values. Human dignity plus solidarity plus social justice plus sustainability plus democratic participation and transparency. And the question is, how consequently, how authentically do you live these values according to all your stakeholders? A scorecard was not invented by us. And in the fields of intersection, in the interfaces, we try to pose the most fundamental ethical questions, the most relevant ethical question. It's about ethics. Ethics is the fundament of economics. It was with Adam Smith like this, and it should be today again like that. And there was a student of 11 years in Barcelona who made a perfect summary of the common good balance sheet. She said, Christian, what you are talking about is actually the future of tomorrow, that the students, or the children of, I'm a child, the children of today are desiring for tomorrow. Just to get, to assure if I got you right, I understood that the common good balance sheet measures how meaningful that product is. Meaningful in the meaning how much does it contribute to the satisfaction of basic human needs? That's the definition of economy, if we agree on that definition, of course. What's the ecological footprint? What's the impact on biodiversity, global climate, and all other ecosystems? How humane are working conditions, not only in this company, but in the whole supply chain from the beginning and the raw materials? Who takes the decisions? And how are the benefits distributed to all persons involved in the process? Cheers. For the common good. And I said, Victoria, that's the best summary I've ever heard. And with your permission, I will use it as an elevator pitch in my public appearances, which I'm doing since almost 10 years. And then I can avoid to explain what is behind this surface. Behind this surface in the full version are 150 pages, and in the slim version, 70 pages. These are 20-ish common good issues, and one issue is then spread up to 5 aspects, because humane working conditions, that's the broadest possible approach, and then we focus on safety and health. We focus on experience of meaning. We focus on time flexibility and time management, on participation and co-determination, and on diversity. These are 5 focuses. This is the maximum per. And then in every aspect, you can escalate 5 steps. And what differs our instrument from all other instruments, you can also achieve negative aspects. If you, for instance, transfer profits to tax havens, you lose many, many points. Or if you profit from human rights violations in the supply chain, you lose many, many points. Or if you lobby behind the curtains and are not registered in the European Lobby Register, just for instance, you lose a lot of points. And now a jump. Probably you all know that Common Good Balance Sheet is not the only sustainability reporting framework which is on stage. So I jump very wide in the future. One day, we are fully sure that there will be just one set of remaining international sustainability reporting standards. Although we prefer to call them an ethical reporting instrument for companies. But my point now is, please, the movements, no matter if it's Fridays for Future or any other movement or the Green Offices movement, please let's engage transparently in a political struggle for the best possible standards, first on the European level, which are just now created, and later on the international level, because this is a highly political issue, but they are being created totally behind closed doors and curtains. And then we could include, which is our proposal, 3 things. First, these sustainability reports or common good balance sheets, they are made in a way that the external audit leads to a quantitative score. And the quantitative score is made visible on every product, and not only on the front door and the website. And in the first step, consumers and investors and all market actors have more complete information for their only then a little bit more rational choices, just to link to neoclassical language. But much more importantly, today the companies that are more responsible and more sustainable and do more for the climate and for social cohesion and for gender equality, they used to have higher costs. And they used to have higher market prices, and that's why they today have usually a competitive disadvantage. And other companies that behave less ethically, they have a competitive advantage. And this is perverted, and we would like to correct it, linking high scores to positive incentives and lower scores to negative incentives. And here comes another good message. All these incentives already exist. So we could start with public procurement of the city of Amsterdam and economic promotion. There are many, many programs. We could go over taxes. We could go over finance. The bank asks, first, what is the impact of that investment for which you're asking a loan on the climate, on biodiversity, on distribution, on gender? And only if no common good is damaged, and no fundamental value is neglected, only then the financial risk assessment is done in a second step, and if both are passed, the money flows as a means into a fully sustainable development, and the loan conditions are the more favorable, the higher the contribution to the democratically defined common good. Okay, so it's still this, I admit we focus on markets, although we don't champion markets. Markets are just one stage of the economy. But our main contribution is to transform capitalistic markets into ethical markets. We want to overcome capitalism, but not necessarily discharge markets. And maybe that is an interesting element. We would like to create cooperative markets. And this is probably not easy to understand and to imagine for people who think that competition, literally correctly spoken, competition, is a constitutive characteristic of markets. Well, cooperative markets would incentivize strongly negatively behaviors that go aggressively against the others. It would incentivize softly negatively behaviors that are just ignorant of others. It would incentivize softly positively behaviors that are occasionally cooperative or solitary, and it would incentivize strongly positively behaviors that are systemically cooperative and solidary. And we will find good examples for these qualifications. And maybe in this chart, it's just another way to look at it. We want to detach from capitalism, we want to overcome capitalism, but we don't want to fall into socialism, on the other hand. We do not discharge private property, we do not discharge collective property, but we propose both limits to every type of property and also conditions for every type of property. And one limit to private property could be no person can own more than this amount of private property, and no company can be bigger than this size. And every company has to do a common good balance sheet as a prerequisite to participate in ethical markets. Just one example. And that's why our diversity approach to property includes commons in the same way as it includes private property. But we would like to have commons enshrined in the same prominence in constitutions as we have enshrined and protected private property. Someone said, only when we have achieved likewise strict protection of common property or the commons, then as we already have achieved with private property, then a solution is ahead. So there are 20 cornerstones, and I'm just mentioning two more very briefly. One is because it attaches perfectly to the conservation approach to biodiversity, is the idea of ecological human rights. Ecological human rights is a coin with two sides, and the forefront of the coin are protection rights of Mother Nature. So it would become international law that the planet is a legal subject and has a protection right. And as a consequence on the backside, humans, as one of many million species, have a limited individual consumption right of ecological resources. But if all humans use up their full consumption rights, planetary ecosystems will stay stable. So we would stay as mankind as a whole within the planetary boundaries. That's the idea. It's building on the donut of Kate Raworth, and you know that the donut is building on the concept of planet Earth. So it's a third floor on this concept story. And the last one, on the international level, we propose ethical world trade as an alternative to the equally nonsensical extremes free trade and protectionism. The only difference is that protectionism is such an ugly word that no one wants to be a protectionist. And whereas free trade is such a beautiful word that everybody is for free trade. But if you look at it, it's equally nonsensical because it doesn't make any sense to increase trade as an end in and of itself, same as it doesn't make any sense at all to consider trade as a bad thing. We propose to consider trade as a means like money, and if it contributes and helps to achieve our goals, we promote it, and as soon as it puts at risk or endangers the achievement of our goals, we restrict it and have not the least problem with restricting it and don't consider ourselves and don't call ourselves protectionists, which is just a misnomer and a misleading term. There's a broader concept behind, but now it's not the moment to dive deeper. Now it's the moment to show some pictures, to present the movement. I already talked about the 200 local chapters. The strongest country at the moment is Germany with 100 of the 200 local chapters, although the movement started in Austria. And we welcome companies from all branches, from organic farms and solidarity, agricultural corporations, to bakers, of course. Maybe one story from that baker. This baker did not pay obedience to the law of supply and demand. What they did is they collected the supply chain as a chain of appreciation of all stakeholders, and they invited the corn farmers from the surroundings of Berlin. They invited the habitual customers. They invited the employees of the bakery and everyone else. And then, when everybody was sitting at the table, there was a moment of silence. And then the bakers asked the farmers, "Which price do you need this year in order to have a good life?" And after another moment of silence, the farmers name a price. And since 25 years, this price is paid without negotiation, and it works for everybody. Yeah, there are more and more medium-sized companies, although we started with mostly tiny and small companies, but now more and more. This is an outdoor company, most sustainable company in Germany. This is the cooperative for the common good in Vienna. We did not get the bank license, so we are not a bank, we are cooperative, but we have 4,500 cooperatives. And we created, in cooperation with a bank, the first common good current account in Austria, which is now 1,000-fold on the market. And we have the 100% guarantee that every euro that is on a common good current or savings account is invested 100% sustainably. So it's not only a fund without arms or without nuclear power. No, it's 100%. So it's full organic agriculture or renewable energy or social housing or sustainable mobility. We would have to define the concept mobility for that. Yes, and this is a public company just to show the broadness of the movement. It's a health insurer, and this health insurer from Bavaria got at the second last COP24 in Poland a climate protection prize for achieving that the clients of that health insurer consume less and less meat, either meatless Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Thursdays, but not with enforcement, not with incentives, but with strong arguments, with conviction. Yes, and I also could now enlarge the prototype story, but I just, don't worry, I just mentioned them. I just mentioned that more and more municipalities are joining now, and also universities. This is the first public university. It's a technical university in Germany that has done a common good balance sheet. So common good balance sheet is not only for companies of Nuremberg. And there has been created a first chair, Economy for the Common Good, at the University of Valencia, where we celebrated our second scientific conference. So I heard that there is a restructuring ongoing on the VU as for the economics department, which is a very joyful message. And the idea is that maybe the green offices, but we can talk that on the sofa. Yeah, and not to forget, Amsterdam Impact is already promoting B Corps and common good balanced companies. next to a different department from Amsterdam, which is doing the circular economy program with the donut economics approach. So Amsterdam is quite in the forefront of cities that at least partly implement some of these tapas, of these plenty alternatives. And of course, the next step is now, it's all about politics. I'm a political scientist. I fully agree that it's all about politics. And although we got a strong backwind from the European Economic and Social Committee, which is not a legislative body of the European Union, but at least it can issue opinions. And one of the opinions it issued on its own initiative was about ECG. It's a 10-pager, and then they put it to voting in the plenary session, and the result was that 86% of its members voted in favor of the inclusion of ECG in the legal framework of the European Union and its member states, being Netherlands or Austria. And of course, this hasn't happened. and so I'm confident on the one hand that we will achieve something, and on the other hand, I'm a political analyst and I see the decline of democracies, and that's why I make a case for stronger democracies. And I have already explained what I mean by sovereign democracy, because I learned that also Putin calls his understanding of democracy, of governance, sovereign democracy. For me, he's an autocrat. There is no democracy at all in this country. So don't be confused if Putin deems himself a sovereign democrat. It's at least a different concept of sovereign democracy than ours. And mine is quite well thought, I think, because if there is a highest instance in the state, then the next logical question is, which are the rights of this instance in the state? And do you enjoy one of these 10 exemplary fundamental collective rights? That's the distinctive point. When we have achieved strong individual fundamental and human rights, which is a great achievement, and we should improve them. But we did not think so much about collective fundamental rights. This is a different type. These are sovereign rights, and my assumption is that in the Netherlands, the same status quo is reigning as in Germany and Austria. 0. Switzerland, 1. Italy, 1. That's something. That is something that happened coincidentally in Chile. It was not the right of the people to initiate a constitutional transformation. It was an allowance. It was a kind of permission of the government. So it's not the right. It's not the right. It happened. I was extremely happy that it happened, and I'm extremely sad about the outcome. I'm almost depressed. I could say a lot of this, but no, I want to spread hope and not depression. And just one tiny example, because I'm at the end of my time, but I have a couple of more minutes to play with you through one example of sovereign democracy. And we can name the process differently. We already heard citizen assemblies, economic convention, constitutional process, or something more complex than just a referendum. Because a referendum is the smallest right. It's just one option of many new elements of a sovereign democracy. But in one of these different possibilities, we, the people, will have one day the power to decide on the limitation of inequality. Same as on the conservation of biodiversity, or on the model of trade that we prefer. It's just an example. There is no example that maybe even on war or peace, but that's a different story for today. So I start with an easy example, and I don't know if I have a flip chart here, near. Then I would use the flip chart, and I would invite 10 people to join me here and to play the sovereign democracy game with me. I would love to play with all of you, but I think you're too many. That's why I would prefer to play with 10. So I'm inviting 10 of you of diverse sexes to come out here. and I take this one. So please join me, and it will not hurt, and you will not be blamed, that I can assure. And it will be a joyful memory for your further life. So please be courageous and join me. Yeah, okay, there's 2 are already joining. Please come from all walks of life, please join me. Thank you for playing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 more. 5 more, please come. It can be 11. And please make a circle and keep standing. It's not on the couch because it requires. Yeah. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So can you make a half circle that I can see everybody of you? Yeah. You can step a little bit back that I can see the others. That's great. So this is the Democratic Convention of Amsterdam today. You're welcome. Democratic Convention. And yesterday we decided to have a minimum income in the Netherlands. Is there a legal minimum income in the Netherlands? Yeah. How much is it? 11 euros per hour, and is the 1,600 a month. Okay, so we do have a minimum income per month in the Netherlands, 1,600. That's already a rule. And today we decide on a maximum income. And the maximum income is a maximum multiple of the minimum. In the first round, you're invited to make proposals. How many times the maximum income should be limited in relation to the minimum income. You're totally free. You can say there should be no inequality. You can propose that there should be no limit to inequality, or you can say so many times, or so many times. And every proposal that is made will be voted upon. So you can make many proposals. That's the innovation of the procedure that I'm bringing. Please, proposals. If it's short.
In which city?
Oh, it's all over the country. It's for the whole country. It would be enshrined in the constitution, and in order to not fall over procedural questions now, my request is to just to play with me, because the real convention will take a whole year. So in the real convention, we have a whole year to clarify all procedural questions, and the question is defined by the people. Only today, I'm bringing the question because I only have 5 minutes to play the game with you now. That's why I request you to play with me this game, to accept the question, and only make proposals for the answers. So anyone has any proposal with how many times the maximum income can be limited in relation? 10 times is the first proposal. Yeah, you can make a different proposal. We will. Okay. 10, 4, 2, 3, 3. So we have 2, 3, 4, 10. 1,000. 250. Okay. We have 2, 3, 4, 10, 250, and 1,000. Any proposal missing? Last call. You're fine? 1. Okay. And last one from the audience? How many? 10. Okay. 10 is already there. 10. 5. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 250, and 1,000. These are many proposals. Okay, the procedure I have brought with me is called systemic consensus. It's an innovation from 2 mathematicians from the University of Graz. And they were kind of frustrated with our habit to decide with the principle of simple majority. One proposal in the room, and everybody has to be in favor or against. And only this creates a tension which makes us feel uncomfortable. And they were searching for alternatives. And they found hundreds of alternatives, and this is the alternative they think is currently the best available alternative. It has two innovative elements. First element is not one proposal is voted upon, but diverse proposals are voted upon. Because every sector of society, from the poorest to the richest, from the environmentalists to startup entrepreneurs, every sector of society can make a proposal, but only proposals make sense that include the whole society, because we will not measure affirmation. If we measured affirmation as we do today, the strongest, the richest, and the most powerful could get their way through, and they could start a campaign for their proposal. This does not work if we measure resistance. And if we measure resistance, we measure the pain and the loss of liberty and the diminishing of the common good, which is happening thanks to a proposal. Because the winning proposal will be that one that creates, that provokes the least resistance in the whole population. And now you're voting. Now you are the sovereign instance. So this is the whole population, but I'm only doing it with the 10 of you because I would be unable to count all the arms that go up. So I will count arms. And you have 3 ways to show your pain with a proposal and the resulting resistance against the proposal. 3 ways. First way is you listen to the proposal. That proposal will, at the end of the process, if it's the winning proposal, be included in the constitution of the country. You listen to the according pain. If there's no pain, you don't have energy to resist against it, and you do nothing. You raise no arm. Second option, you listen to the proposal. You feel the pain. If there's some pain, some itchy, scratchy, strange feeling, you raise 1 arm because you have a low level of resistance, sufficient to raise 1 arm. And the third option is you listen to the proposal, you feel, it's hurting like hell, and automatically you have so much energy to raise 2 arms to show your strong resistance against this proposal. Got it? Yeah. Could you maybe make the circle a little bit closer there that I can see it? Yeah, great. So I can see you better. Recommendation: if you close your eyes, you don't see the audience, which tries to influence you. You don't see what your neighbor is doing, and you maybe can feel better if you have your eyes closed. Okay. So we start from the lowest to the highest, and the first proposal is in the same working time. No one should earn more than someone else. Same earning for everybody. Please show your pain with and resistance against no inequality at all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You correct me if I count incorrectly. 15 votes of resistance. Second proposal: the highest income can be up to 2 times the minimum income. Please show your pain with and resistance against maximum factor 2 of inequality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 votes of resistance. Third proposal: maximum 3 times. Highest income can be up to 3 times the lowest income. Please show your resistance against maximum factor 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next one is 4, maximum 4 times the highest income. Please show your pain with and resistance against factor 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next one is factor 5 is the maximum factor. Please show your pain with and resistance against maximum factor of inequality of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes of resistance. Next one is factor 10. Please show your resistance against maximum factor of inequality of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Did you raise 2 arms or 1 arm? The last one? 2. Then it's 13. Then it's 13. Second last, 250 times is the highest possible income. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. And last proposal, maximum 1,000 times. Only that. And please show your last time. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, it's no? 18. Okay. 18. Again, 18. Okay. So Which one is the winner? Sorry? 3.5, exactly. So 3 and 4 scored equally. We would have the second round with fine-tuning. We don't take this time. You were a great convention and sovereign instance. Thank you very much for playing. You can go back. I wrap up in my last minute. What you produced is an inverse Gaussian curve. The inverse Gaussian curve is, where is my, here? Here. Is this, or the value of resistance. X is resistance, Y is inequality. And what is here? Here is socialism, with extreme resistance against socialism. And what is here? With even higher resistance against capitalism. And where is the winner? Between 3 and 4, let's say 3.5. So, second last question. Do you think that is representative for the whole world? I'm doing this exercise so far in 25 countries, and in 9 out of 10 cases, the winner is, what is here the winner? 8, yeah, no. Actually, it's 10. It's just another example. And the last question is, what do you think is the status quo? In 9 out of 10 cases, the winner is factor 10. If it was 3.5 or 8, you wouldn't even notice the difference. Huh? The difference you notice to the status quo. It's 360,000 times. Yes, it's one person that earned $5 billion in 1 year, not for taking care of children, of sick people, of the elderly or the dying, but because of taking care of financial assets. And if I one day initiate one referendum in my country, then I would initiate a referendum that people who take care of children, sick people, elderly or dying people, should not be allowed to earn less than people who take care of financial assets. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Christian. I would like to ask you for now to go and sit on the couch.
Yes.
So for the audience also, questions we will do after. So first we have our next speaker, and that is Maartje Zaal. She's the Green Office Movement Coordinator at Students Organizing for Sustainability International. And this is an organization that supports green offices in founding them and also in, well, supporting them. And she is going to talk about taking leadership in sustainability and climate justice. And what else? She is here to tell us about, well, youth leadership, and also youth takes leadership in that. So please, a warm applause for Maartje Zaal.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm really, really grateful that I'm here and that I can speak on behalf of the youth and of the Green Office movement, and also that, like, the VU is having the guts to set up Sapiens to reimagine our future, which is pretty bold, actually. So I would like to start with a small visualization exercise. So I want you all to close your eyes and just take a deep, deep breath. And it's not only to reduce my nerves, but it has a purpose. So, okay, take a deep breath. Now I want you to think about the problem statements that we have and that we are trying to solve right now. And try to feel what it does to your body.
And now imagine that you are a student starting this year, your studies, probably gonna be like 3 to 4, 5, 6 years. We are now in 2022. So if you're finished, it's about like 2026 to 2030, which is the time we should have like vastly reduced our CO2 emissions, changed completely like how we interact with the world around us actually. And imagine how that feels. So you can open your eyes if you want. So if I have read and learned a lot about like all the issues that we are trying to face, and often this gives me the feeling of just wanting to like roll up, lay in my bed, or like run away into the woods. And many of us know that we are having like serious challenges, but as we all know, it's also really hard to actually act upon it, because it's such a heavy and big topic, and it's so complex. And like we listen today to all the solutions, and they are all like super interesting and promising and exciting, and but we also know that it's like, how fast are we going to be able to implement those changes? That's like a really big question. So I hope that with my short talk, I'm gonna give a bit more insight in how we can like speed up. I'm starting with a perspective from the Green Office movement. So what we do as a Green Office, we are a hub of students and staff members that together aim to institutionalize sustainability at their institution. So we come together, we look at what is the current situation, what are things that are already happening, and how can we support, nourish, and grow them. And one of our goals, of course, is to make this change into these institutions. But for me personally, and for many people working at the Green Office as well, the big value is that you actually come together with like-minded people and are able to talk about what you're working on and what you're dealing with, and like what it does to you. Like, how do you deal with it on a daily basis? How do you, how do you deal with it? Like, how do you imagine your future? How do you interact with your parents, who would like you to like work and get a house and focus on your studies? Well, you're like, yeah, but if I'm done with my studies, like, can I pay a house? Can I like? Okay, so there are many questions, and working at a Green Office really gives you this space of doing something. First of all, with those questions, but also just doing something positive, because you are working on the solutions that you maybe learn about in your studies, or that you learn about in other ways, and it allows you to get some ownership and some control, because you get some responsibility, and the institutions give you also some responsibility, so you're actually empowered to do something with it. And that's extremely important, also on a bigger level. So we talked about it a little bit in the beginning of this day, like how can we empower youth? What can we personally do for sustainability and for our youth? And I would argue that we need more humor, we need more art, we need more space for feeling and expressing our emotions, to grieve and to connect on a deeper level, so that we get re-energized. Because like I learned not long ago that burnout, actually, the reason that we are so burnt out is that we are just grieving. We don't have any energy anymore, because we just keep all our emotions in that sense in ourselves. And well, which I think it's super logical, because we all the time we hear about species dying out, like people dying, like maybe the world is in many places better than it was, but we hear all the time what's not going well. And we, as a society, we don't have really a space where we come together and grieve about it together, so we can work through those emotions. And of course, humor and art are like actually ways of doing that. And as I said, so responsibility and ownership is also very important. So we need to trust more in the people that actually have ideas and that have tried something and that they know it works, but often we are so afraid to work with people that we don't know necessarily or know directly, or that think differently than us. So we are afraid to give away this responsibility, and that's why like participation, so the participation society is so difficult, because how do we bring all these different actors together? But we need it to actually make a change. And also this vulnerability, like, I don't know how the future is gonna look like. I don't know where we need to go. I only know what I like to do is like bring people together and share what I learned. But I need, for the energy problem, I need someone who knows more about energy than I know. And we need to, way more show that we don't have the answers. Like, no one knows how the future is gonna look like, because we have never been where we are now. So, we also don't know where we're gonna be in 10 years or 50 years. And that's okay. We can create it together. And also we need visions of a hopeful future. So when you start your studies and you're like, when I'm done studying, like, our system will collapse anyway, so whatever. It's really important to actually also have a vision of, okay, probably things are going to change, but that doesn't mean that there is no value in my life or in my studies, because I will learn how to interact with other people. I will learn how to deal with this new situation. I will learn why we came where we came here. But I also have visions of what I can do if we indeed are having different systems. Like, because I know that I know someone who is good at dancing, and when I feel bad, I can watch this person. Or like, there are so many, like, you need, so this quote of like, you need a village to raise a child, you also need a village to create a future together. Like, you need everyone to be able to exist, actually. And so this is about like, empowerment, and empowerment is needed to actually take leadership, because if we don't have these visions, if we don't have a space to experience and to fail and try again and to like connect on a deeper level, then it's also very hard to take leadership. And another reason why we need this empowerment is also because, like, we are trying about working transdisciplinary, but the problem about transdisciplinary working is that you all speak a different language. So the one person studying arts speaks a different language than someone studying physics or economy. So if you're going to talk about where we need to go in the future, you are definitely going to agree on many things. And that is a really big problem if we have to change on all those factors very, very soon. So we need like some kind of glue so that we can overcome all those challenges. And that's why like all these things help us to connect on a deeper level, because we all are human, we all need water, like all the things we discussed before. We have all those needs, and I mean, maybe, you have some same interests and the same humor or the same fears for your children, and you can connect on that level, and then you go away from the linear approach, and there becomes like so much space to create together because you don't have to think about it all beforehand. You can just go because you can trust the people around you that you want to go in the same direction. And that is like, that accelerates the speed very, very much. But for all of this, we need to change also internally, because this takes a lot of courage, because it's not things that we learned, especially, for example, in the academic world, talking about like how you feel or what is the meaning of life, like the question that we had in the almost at the end about religion and why like what kind of paradigm do you have? How do you exist in the world? That are like very difficult questions, but they are super, super needed. And yeah, so how do we get there to be able to take a lead in this, what is needed? So for me, so of course leadership is something different for anyone, for everyone, and I'm just going to show how I think about it. So first of all, you need to start, I think, at the system level. So what does leadership mean to you in a broader sense? So for me, I always look at nature and ecosystems, and I see there that everyone in the ecosystem has a different responsibility or like a different niche in what they are doing. And if the ecosystem flourishes well and all the individual parts flourish well, then you have a flourishing system. And what I like about it is that I can just take in my spot in our social and environmental ecosystem, and if I make sure that I get what I need to flourish, then I can have the most impact because I help the ecosystem at large by doing my job in that ecosystem. Yeah, and then we need to accept together where we are right now, and we need to forgive ourselves about all the things we did until now that maybe led us to this place, because it all has some reason. I mean, we did break down a lot of taboos. Like we developed in many ways in a lot of directions, and it's just okay. We are here now, and let's accept that. And then there is space again to go further. And then for leadership, I want to look at a personal level. So it's very important also to ask, like, who am I? What are my values? And what are my needs to flourish? And also, like, what do I stand for? And this can be difficult because we are not really taught that. We mainly are taught to, like, how we can fit in this system and how we can be successful and get status and get money. So something that can help is seeing your surroundings as a metaphor or as a mirror. Because like where we started with was like what kind of emotions are all coming up. And these emotions are saying you something. They are like a compass. So they will give you information about what you value and what you find important and also what you need. So for example, people not acting for sustainability give me a feeling that people don't value me, that I'm not carried. And I had to deal with that, like, what does that say about me? And how can I make sure that I feel valued and I feel carried without being dependent on what other people do? And also, yeah, I forgot. And then comes another very challenging part, like also like every of those three levels, like ecosystem level, personal level, or community or like team level. Like everyone has challenges in different levels. For me, this last one is the most challenging, I would say. So there comes a time when you know what you want and you understand what leadership means to you, that you are gonna talk about it, stand up for it. But this is very, very important because it gives the other parts of the ecosystem where you're going to work together with information about how you can flourish and what they can do to help you and what they can get from you to flourish better. So it's very important for that reason. And then as a last point, what leadership is also very important is to stay open and curious. So our society and our world around us is going to change always. And people have different ideas and different values and different truths. And it's extremely important that we stay open and curious because we don't have, like, coming from deep democracy, nobody has a monopoly on the truth. So even, like, we often think that, okay, science gives us the truth, but other people have other idea about what the truth is. And we talked about, like, right-wing rising and democracy breaking down, and that is something bad. But some people, but also those people have a truth, and they are worthy of expressing that truth, and we can only go further until we understand what they are coming from and until we can connect with them on a deeper level so we can also accommodate their needs and we can together create a flourishing future that works for all of us. And also your truth can change. So if you don't judge other people that hard, then you are also easy. It's also easier for you to not judge yourself too hard if you want to make a change in your own ideas about what is true. So some quotes which are inspiring, I think. So courage doesn't happen when you already have all the answer. It happens when you're ready to face the questions that you have been avoiding in your whole life. So this is what I talked about with personal leadership. Be open to, like, radically ask who you are. Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be true, kind, merciful, generous, or honest. We have to stand up for those things, even though it might be very difficult. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself aloud. And you cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Oh yeah, this is again. I wanted to say one more thing before we end. Oh yeah. Yeah, so I think as for Sapiens, we need to have the courage to accept that we don't know where we're going and to be open to anything that comes in from society or people coming here and use them as mirrors to get further on to this question of where we are going. Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maartje. Could you take a seat on the couch? And Christian, can I ask you to come?
Here.
Oh, that whoa. Okay, yeah, can you take a seat too? So thank you very much. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, come on.
Okay. Christian, I first wanted to ask you a question, and especially now that you heard this wonderful speech of Maartje on also youth leadership and youth empowerment. So can you tell us something more about what the role of youth leadership in moving towards a common good economy would be?
The role of youth leadership for a specific goal.
For the common good economy. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little bit hesitant because I wonder if I can talk about leadership for a specific goal. Because, yeah, I would encourage young leaders to define their own goals, to self-reflect, to listen as deep as to connect to nature, to ask for their purpose and their calling. And if it's at the end of the day the economy for the common good, or the donut economics, or the social and solidarity economy, or the commons movement, I'm more than happy. But I would not prejudge their engagement for any specific purpose. So I only can formulate a wish, and the wish I can formulate is that I would love that Fridays for Future and similar movements and young green students and similar movements, that they look at those existing alternative economic models and then include in their narrative, if you want to protect the climate, if you want to conserve biodiversity, if you want to get back drinkable rivers, which I 100% support since 30 years at least, then we could implement a combination of donut economics and social and solidarity economics and commons and economy for the common good, for instance. That would be the proposal, and I think we could create a powerful synergy if we went this way.
Yeah, thank you. Can you reflect on that?
Yeah, I think I would agree. Like, I think it gives, that's the model of the economy of the common good is there. It gives hope, it gives perspectives, it gives more ideas of where we could be going, and that is super valuable. And also to find, it gives young people a way to connect with those people that can be their allies. Yeah, I would be like to be allies. So
I really appreciated your extremely deep level of self-reflection. That's extremely helpful, and the more successful someone becomes, the more important it is to remain self-reflective. That's one. And I also appreciated especially that you mentioned that no one is the owner of the truth. Until recently, that was a matter of course. But all of a sudden, we do have fact checkers who think that they own the truth. We have people who present alternative truth, but that it's, well, some say this is my truth. I think every person has the permission to talk about her or his truth. I would never call it a truth. I would just call it, this is my insight, or this is my conviction, this is my value system, this is my narrative or my proposal. And then we would fight a lot less. And if we talked in a more appreciative manner, we could accept every different position without calling each other socialist or fascist or anything. This is so extremely blocking a constructive public discourse. And yeah, that's what I liked in your presentation.
So Maartje, you talked about ecosystems and how that connects to leadership and what role that plays in your truth about leadership. How do you think Sapiens, what kind of role can Sapiens play in bringing these people, like individuals, but also actors, like institutions or organizations together? And what role can Sapiens play? How can they facilitate?
So I would say that we need, like, to be able to imagine this future, we also need, and to imagine a future that is sustainable, actually, and as well, we also need to rethink what it means to be a human being. And if we talk about Sapiens and the Anthropocene, it's about what it means to be human and what impact can we have on the world around us. And for that, it's also important to know what the impact of the world around us is upon us and how we are connected to that. So I think that Sapiens could like open up this conversation about who do we want to be in the world, what kind of questions are we asking when we are doing research, what kind of questions are we asking when we are like building connections with what kind of actors, like how, yeah, just like reflect and be open and invite people from all kind of different backgrounds, like the people that are like working on regenerative farms, that are building eco-villages, that are making new models about how the society could look like, that are working on art to express those emotions that we all feel around it, so we can together yeah, a bit like a big green office. So we want to implement regeneration or sustainability in all factors of society. And how are we going to do that? We don't know. So what I think, so that is more about like what Sapiens can do, but how to facilitate that, I think, is the people that are in Sapiens like learn and practice skills to facilitate those kind of conversations, to be like really open, to have like this, for example, active hope, or like, active hope is a course where you go deep in and you learn to talk about and feel and about sustainability, but also, for example, klimaatgesprekken, they have like really good tools to talk about sustainability. And then also provide resources, because one main thing that the transition, people working on a transition are lacking is enough resources to actually do what they want to do. Like, I would like to have a team of 20 people in my green office, but I don't have the resources for that, and we could be so much more effective if we have more money for that. So, like, if Sapiens could bring together those actors that actually want to bring a change and have resources and connect them with those that have the solutions but don't have access to those resources for what kind of reason.
Do you have something to add to that, Christian?
Yeah, I would directly add, why would the invited actors accept the invitation of Sapiens? And my recommendation is because Sapiens stands for wisdom. Until recently, nobody really stood pronouncedly for wisdom. And this could mean, just a few examples, that knowledge is clearly considered as a function of wisdom. So we don't need more knowledge. We need functional knowledge as a function of wisdom, which are holistic, sustainable solutions, which are always connected to values, which always combine many truths to a bigger truth, and which then build the foundation of our worldview. And we already talked about the necessity to overcome the anthropocentric worldview. And I think as long as we talk about the Anthropocene, this is still an expression of an anthropocentric worldview. But it could be one of the proposals to overcome the Anthropocene in order to transit to the biocene or the ecocene, because we heard from Jord that there is a biocentric or an ecocentric, not an egocentric, but an ecocentric worldview that could be next. And then we step down from any higher level of other species on the same level, on an ice level, to other species. And this could be part of that wisdom that is necessary to make our civilization sustainable. And then I think many invitations will be accepted.
Yeah, thank you for that. We now have time for maximum of 2 questions, because one question, so I see Nele looking very, very angry. So there's one question, because we are a bit over time, so there's one question. So, okay, yeah, there only.
That one was earlier, but oh, sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay, so if so there, can you put up your hands how much resistance you are experiencing?
To catch the cube.
Oops.
I was wondering, since Christian is there and the young people are in the room, and I work for Naturalis, one of the founders together with the VU and Applied University in Holland for Sapiens. And I'm very curious how the young people that wanna use Sapiens as a accelerator or transformator or source of connection and also acting and involving others would look at using value systems like Christian is describing. Because basically at this moment in time, we never have considered about underlying systems or underlying values for Sapiens, just as Christian is describing. So I would be very curious if there's enthusiasm to incorporate some of the work of Christian within Sapiens, if people are in the room enthusiastic about it or have big resistance, because I now learned that resistance is more important than enthusiasm. But that's basically my question.
Who would be able to answer that question?
Oh, you want it? Yeah, fantastic. Okay. There.
If I can. So I think I represent a small group of young people, of about 20 young academics from the Nationale Denktank. It's an organization that is working every year to solve a societal issue. And this year our theme is biodiversity, or the biodiversity crisis. So far we've had about 8 weeks of research, of analysis, and now we're going to continue working on solutions to these issues. And we see that many of these issues are based upon the old system of economics that we're describing, and how we want to transfer to a kind of a new system where these values are embedded into it as well. So when I hear this talk, if I speak for myself as a young person currently trying to solve a biodiversity crisis, I can say that definitely enthusiasm is arising in me. So if that helps, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add something? I think also language here is language and like the approach we use to communicate what we're talking about is very, very important. So that you use the language and the expression form that connects to those people that you want to attract. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want please ask for an applause for Christian and Maarten. Okay, you can take a seat. Yeah. Okay, and next, Shahad, could you give an introduction for the groceries, the handover?
Yes, yes. I'd like to invite Philip Patberg to the stage. So, yes, please give a big hand. So, all day, or the whole program, we've been talking about how we can take action collaboratively. And we've kind of collected ingredients, we've put them in the box, and Philip, what are you going to do with the box?
Is it on? Yeah. Hey, first of all, thanks a lot to the speakers and to all of you still here. You must feel like my students when I tell them I will have a break, then we don't. But I think it was really worth it. There was so much in there. A bit like the box. It's actually really a box of fresh vegetables. So I didn't bring money. We don't have a lot of money. I didn't bring the millions to solve the problem. But what I have is, in a way, symbolic keys. And they're sort of somewhere in the box. The keys to Sapiens. Because in a way, Sapiens is an empty space. It's an idea that needs to be filled and I'm totally with Christian here, it's not about the one program we want to follow, the one ideology we want to do there, but for the many, and maybe we can find overlaps, but we basically have that space. And it's for you, it's for young people. We explicitly said, and Peter was there to say that as well, when we set up Sapiens, it cannot be for those that actually failed you. Because I have to say, I have to make a confession. I think the university really has failed many of us in what we do, because we've been teaching all of those things in the little boxes for many, many, many years. And now we all go like, oh, everything's connected. Oh, we do new system science and we bring it all together now. And obviously everyone knew that all along, but that was not how we taught all of this. And so I must say I feel a bit ashamed almost to be here, to be a professor and to do all of this and then say, now it's your problem and you can fix it. So that's not what I'm going to say. I want to say Sapiens is maybe a space where we can indeed rebuild, where we can rewild, where we can restore, where we can reimagine our future, and we're going to do that together. So here's a box of vegetables. Here's a symbolic key to all the young people, because without you, it will not work. And I think I will give the box to Gabriella, who is our Green Office representative. So let me do that. And then give a big applause. And I think we do have drinks outside and some snacks, which are, of course, fully vegan. And thanks, everyone, for being here. It was a great pleasure.
Do
you want to say something? Take the box. I take the box.
Hi. Hello. Yes. Okay. So I wanted to thank you for giving us those vegetables. And I also like to say that we don't need money, we need the resources, and the resources are here, and we need your help. And we are very looking forward to working with you as the Green Office. Find us outside there, find us in our office, email us, and yeah, please get involved. And thank you for inviting us to this event. Yeah.
Okay, wow, fantastic. Then on some final notes, so indeed, I think, Shahad, are many people we have to thank for now.
Yes, just 2 more minutes of your time. Again, thank you so much for coming. So many of you came here. And I loved being surrounded by such motivated people, and I can't wait to see what's next. I'm sure a lot. We have a sneak peek of what's coming upcoming month. Yes? Take a picture or come to us so we can give you more information about these events. I'm sure they're very interesting to you all. And then there's some people we'd like to thank. Erik for DJing, he was outside, and I think he's going to be there during the drinks we'll have. Margarita for designing this beautiful banner. Camille for setting up and hosting the panel. I think it was her first time, so she did really well. And let me see, Nadine for guiding the art and science tour, and then Alma for the catering that you will enjoy in a bit. And of course, Nele for taking the lead and organizing this event. Yeah, and now.
Yeah, and then on some final remarks. No worries. Final things. So outside there are again all those great initiatives that you can connect with. There are also SDG pins available. So we've made you all jealous during the course of this day with these pins. Maybe you can get them outside. So feel free to get them. And also Christian and Lorena will do a dance later. So also, well, keep your eyes open for that. So please already give them a big applause, and we'll see you outside.